Thank you.
On behalf of the entire
Board, I'd like to welcome you all to this March 1st work session. The sun is out, so it's going to be that way for the rest of March. Since, just to kind of get everybody up to speed on how our work sessions work, a lot of information on it, we want to make sure we correct it so that everybody understands what you're going to be seeing tonight. The school board, we've asked Dr. Kelly to prepare the state of the schools address, educate our two new school board members. That's the role of the work session. And obviously, it's Amy Austin and you again. You would be available via remotely and Amy is here. And then in the high school, two things will happen. The high school will have the state of the schools address, but also the high school administration will present the second topic, which is academic achievement, junior, senior high school. This is a school board work session, so no decisions will be made and no votes will be taken during this part. After each presentation, questions will be taken from board members. And time permitting, we'll have probably either between the work session and our regular board meeting 7:15, or after the regular board meeting, we'll have time to break off into groups to answer questions for anybody that would have them after the meeting. So depending, if we get done, we have the second meeting supposed to start today at 7:15, so just depending a little bit on time. But we'll be there to answer that as well. And also, you can always give the board feedback. As you know, contact info is on our website, and also contact school administrators with respect to that topic tonight. Also, the audio recording of the work session and both sets of PowerPoint slides will be posted on the corporation's website, though the PowerPoint needs to be ADA compliant per federal law. We're working to get that handled as well. So without further ado, I'll give you Dr. Killian.
Thank you, Mr. Carpet. I'm going to take my mask off. Hopefully you can hear my voice. Yay! Yeah, that's a good thing. If you all want to sit in these seats and look forward, you're welcome to do that. Sit with your backs being to the presentation, that's entirely up to you. While you're doing that, I do want to give some thanks. I want to thank the Lord for his healing and grace and mercy. I want to thank all of you for giving me time and patience. The doctor said it could take up to a year for my voice to get back, and fortunately within 2 months, it's operating again, probably to the chagrin of my wife and other people around me, but I think that's a good thing, at least for me. It's kind of hard being a superintendent without a voice, so thank you all for your patience. I appreciate all that. What I tried to do tonight is to put something together to try to bring Amy Austin, UEN, up to speed with regards to our school district, how we make decisions, how we look at various things in our school districts with proposals, Indiana Code, State Board of Accounts, Department of Local Government Finance, a variety of things. And so I'm hopeful that this information will be useful to you tonight as you learn the process of being a board member and understanding that school boards are a little bit of an anomaly in the state of Indiana. You're elected as representatives of our school district, but Indiana Code authorizes the daily operations of the schools through administration. So you hire a superintendent, you allow the superintendent to hire administration, and then we make sure that we're following the goals, the requirements of Indiana Code, State Board of Accounts, Department of Local Government Finance, a variety of things that we have to follow. So I want to get into some of that. And then it's up to you to accept or reject those recommendations. So tonight's agenda, I won't read all of this to you, but I'm going to try to do the best that I can in the time that we have to try to put everything together to give you a better understanding of how school districts, school boards operate in the state of Indiana, specifically West Lafayette schools. Our mission is to engage students in a world-class educational experience that prepares them to be well-rounded, ethical, innovative, creative, productive, and adaptive citizens who shape our global society. The reason I'm sharing that with you is because part of our desire in our school district, and part of the mission of our school district, of course, is to ensure that we're implementing our strategic plan, which is one of the big processes, if you will, to help us drive improvement. So our improvement plans come from our strategic plans. 2010, we had a group of stakeholders representing all areas of our school district put together an academic strategic planning committee with a certified Cambridge strategic planner, Dr. Janet Emmerich. She again came back in 2017, group of stakeholders, about 50 people, working together to create our mission, to create our belief statements, create our action plans, etc. In 2014 to 2016, we have 47 stakeholders come together to help us put together a facility strategic planning committee. So these plans help us drive our decisions for the future. And also school board policy, and then also all of the legislation that we have to follow, which I'll get into. So who are our patrons and stakeholders? This is just an example, but as a school board member, you're going to hear from various groups in our schools: students, teachers, staff members, parents, administration, business owners, patrons who don't have children in school, city council, mayor, elected officials, various community boards, West Lafayette Library Board, Purdue University staff and administration, police department, city departments. I'd also say neighborhood associations. There's many others that I could list. Please remember that we have 30,000 plus residents who live in our school district. So you represent 30,000 plus residents. We have 12,000 plus registered voters. One thing that I think people forget about has to do with the number of patrons in our school district who don't have children in our schools. We have 25%, roughly rounded to 25% of children, patrons with children in our school, and 75% who don't have children in our school. What I try to listen to quite a bit is what this group is saying, because when we do referendums, when we have to do other big projects, we want to make sure that we're also taking into account these patrons as we consider big projects or big proposals. So some people have asked, so what are the improvements West Lafayette schools have done? You know, you guys keep talking about this or talking about facilities, talking about mission, but what are the improvements? So I want to go over some of those. I don't have everything, but I try to highlight the big ones. We're continuing to improve academic achievement at all levels. That's our #1 priority. We are expanding our special education services and inclusion classroom settings. We brought on our own special education director. We're decentralizing from GLASS, which is our special education co-op between Tippecanoe County schools and Lafayette schools and West Lafayette schools. We're maintaining resources through 2 referendums to keep arts, music, co- and extracurricular programs, and retaining teachers to manage class sizes. We're improving student safety and school security. We're one of the few schools that have put back into our school calendar staff development days. And one of the things that we just did Friday, as some parents know with their children being home, we had staff development, and I heard very positive things about Dr. Renee Aziz, who came in to help us. We scheduled her about 18 months ago with regards to diversity, inclusion, and received a lot of positive input from that staff development process we used on Friday. Although it was virtual in nature, but it still worked. We're increasing building capacity at all schools. Well, I'm very proud to say that we're one of the few school districts that have an intermediate school with a band, choir, and orchestra room. You won't find too many schools in the nation at this level, grades 4 through 6, with those 3 rooms. And now we're including performing arts during the school day. We are promoting our school district. We're actively promoting our school district for a variety of reasons, and I'll get into that later. We're improving our aging facilities. We're adding, we have now operational kitchens at the elementary and intermediate schools. First time in the history of West Lafayette schools that all food is cooked on site for a hot lunch and a hot breakfast, which I'm very proud that we're finally in the 21st century being able to do something like that in our school district. Keeping teacher and staff wages and benefits competitive with high-achieving school districts. I'll get into that in a little bit. And we're maintaining a consistent school district tax rate since 2010. So I'll get into that in a little bit. So those are some of the improvements. There are others that I could highlight, and I will highlight the things that we're working on for future improvements as we get to the end of the presentation. One thing that I keep remembering from War and Peace, the two most powerful warriors are patience and time. We're not like fast food where you can just have it your way every day, quick and easy. We have a lot of things that we have to vet. We have a lot of things that we have to go through with regards to Indiana code, and I'm going to get into some of that here shortly. Before I do that, I want to hit some vocabulary information because sometimes we use alphabet soup around here as educators and people don't understand some of that alphabet soup. So AVs are assessed valuation. That's our real property and the value of our real property within our school district. And as assessed valuation goes up, the same tax rate generates more revenue, and as that tax rate goes down, the same tax rate generates less revenue. A controlled project or construction projects where bonds are sold and payment remains within what's called the tax caps, which means property taxes cannot go any higher than what is allowed by the tax cap. And we'll get into that, more into that a little bit later. A referendum is where the community votes, and if approved, the revenue, the bonds, are outside the tax cap, and home property taxes will go up because they are outside the tax caps. A lot of people don't understand the difference between those two, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. So what's a tax cap? In 2008, our voters in Indiana created a constitutional amendment where property taxes on homes can't go any higher than 1%, 2% for other residential property and farmland, and 3% for other property. Because of the tax caps, West Lafayette schools loses over $1 million a year in local funding. If we didn't have the tax caps, we would be receiving over $1 million more a year. But because of the tax caps, we cannot draw that money, even though the assessed valuation might go a little bit higher, or the taxes go up. We're only allowed to draw that percentage from the tax caps. Debt service is used to pay bonds for construction and other debt as approved by the Department of Local Government Finance. We are under their auspices, so we're not allowed to overexceed our debt. We're not allowed to sell more bonds than we're able to pay back. They're the ones that have final authority that say, yes, everything looks fine financially, you may proceed, or you're extending yourself and you can't proceed. Building Holding Corporation, this is from Indiana Code 2047-2 or 3. It's a holding corporation that allows Indiana public schools to sell secure bonds for construction projects, regardless if you're using a controlled project or a referendum. Later on, you're going to hear from Jane Hernan, who is our bond counsel for our construction. We can get her on the phone. She's going to explain in more detail why West Lafayette schools and other school districts use holding corporations. By the way, a neighboring school corporation very near to us has 5 holding corporations. They use those for their ongoing construction because they're growing at a fast pace. Circuit breaker reduces the amount of taxes to be collected by schools and other taxing agencies based upon the tax caps. Again, we lose over $1 million. Tax increment finance, which is TIF, is carved out of a school district's AV by redevelopment commissions. And what's interesting about our school district, we're only 3 square miles, but over 30% of our base AV has been carved out and put into a TIF district, which means we don't receive the tax base from that. We do receive referendum from our general fund referendum of 37 cents based upon that AV, but we do not receive other taxing capability because of the TIF district. And by the way, there is, legislators are working on this, and I hope this passes. Probably my redevelopment commission comrades don't like me saying this, but they are looking at the possibility of sunsetting the TIF district AV so the AV comes back into the school district. If we were to get back this 30% of AV in the TIF district, more likely than not, we would not need a referendum. More likely than not, we would not need a referendum. Just saying. So it would be nice to be able to get that. ICE Miller, you'll hear from Jane Hernan. ICE Miller, we use experts in our school district to help us make decisions, whether it's financial, whether it's academic, whether it's political, whatever it might be, we bring in experts to help drive these decisions. These aren't decisions that a school board makes on their own. We bring in the experts and they guide and direct us, and you'll hear from Jane Hernan from ICE Miller, who is our bond counsel for all of our construction projects. Baker Tilly is our financial planning, analysis, and projection advisor. Brock is here from Baker Tilly. He's going to give you a brief presentation on our debt service. He's got some very good news for you with regards to projections, and I think it'll be very helpful for our two new board members to understand all of this. By the way, all of this was gone over back in 2014, 2015, 2016, but to bring you guys up to date, that's why we put this together for you. ADM is average daily membership, student enrollment. WLEA is the West Lafayette Education Teachers Association. We are a union state. We have to adhere to certain laws with regards to collective bargaining, teacher discussion. We are required to do that as administration. And we have a very great relationship with the WLEA. We come together and we problem solve. We come together and figure out how to get things done. We work together, and that's the way it should be. We should be collaborative, and I'm very proud in our school district that we have that collaboration with our WLEA membership. The West Lafayette Schools Education Foundation helps support us with regards to fundraising, teacher grants. They do lots of things for our schools, helping our teachers, helping our school district to help, if you will, bridge the gap with some funding. And I'm very thankful to our foundation leaders who have been working hard since its inception around 2006, 2007. And they've done a great job in the fundraising and with teacher grants. And so I want to thank them very much. And several of our board officers are out there. So thank you guys very, very much for everything. So why do we do what we do? Some people have asked me the question, so why do you have your board meetings a certain way? What training do board members receive? So the Indiana School Boards Association is the state representatives of all Indiana school boards in the state of Indiana. They provide training to our board members. They provide legal analysis of procedures, policies, and then they also lobby the state of Indiana legislators to ensure that we have the right legislation, the right funding to fund public schools. So let me give you a couple for instances. So a lot of people don't know this, but Indiana Code does not require a school board to use an agenda. You are not required, any school board in the state of Indiana, you do not have to have an agenda. However, if you do have an agenda, you post it. ISBA recommends that all school districts use an agenda so that you have an understanding, and when you post it, the community has an understanding of those topics. You are not required to take patron comments per Indiana Code. You don't have to. This is a meeting in public for you to do the business of the school board. However, ISBA recommends that you take patron comments. So those are some of the things that they provide to school districts to ensure continuity, preservation, training, whatever you want to call it, for school board members as you learn this role. And for anyone who wants to know why we do what we do, and you have any questions, Michael Addison from ISBA has agreed for me to give you this phone number So feel free to call Michael Adamson or the ISBA attorneys and ask those questions. Because I expect everyone in this room who's hearing my voice, don't take my word for it. Check it out for yourself. Call the people, call DLGF, call State Board of Accounts, call ISBA, call the Superintendent's Association. Feel free to check it out because that's what I expect good researchers to do. Don't believe everything you read on the internet because everything on the internet may not necessarily be true. Check it out for yourself, do your research. Superintendent's Association does the same thing. We adhere to the protocols as trained by the Superintendent's Association. And if you have any questions, Dr. J.T. Koopman, who's the director, has given the phone number. Please feel free to call him, and you can ask the same questions about why do school boards operate the way they operate, etc. We also have the Indiana Association of School Business Officials. They provide certification to train school business officers about school finance and all the requirements of Indiana Code, State Board of Accounts, the Department of Local Government Finance requirements. We have to follow those guidelines. If you don't, you get in trouble. And there is a school district a little north of us that just got in trouble because they didn't follow these recommendations and these guidelines by the State Board of Accounts, by the Department of Labor and Government Finance. They are going to have to pay back close to $800,000 because they didn't follow the requirements and the training as stated in Indiana Code or State Board of Accounts or as required by the DLGF. Here's a real good one for you. And if you're ever bored, here is the Indiana Code requirements. Here are the Indiana Code requirements for Title 20 for legislation of public schools. The next time a person tells you, well, that's not an Indiana Code, you might make sure that they read it first before you believe it. And if it's not an Indiana Code, it might be in State Board of Accounts, it might be with the DLGF. This book changes every year. I think our legislators like the idea of having something to do. So every year, this book changes, and every year we have to update our policies, we have to update our procedures, because this book tends to get larger and larger every year. So feel free to read that. We have to follow those laws, and I think we do a pretty good job of, I think we do a great job of following those. The Indiana Department of Education is the regulatory office of the state, and the Indiana Department of Education creates all the procedures in which all schools follow this. So if you call Abby Meter or you talk to Amy McClure, they will tell you about the hundreds of reports that we do every year to show the Indiana Department of Education we're following the Indiana Code. And the longer you do this, the more you understand the nuances of all of this. Neola is the national organization that provides not only Indiana school districts, but school districts throughout the nation revisions of school board policies based upon state and federal law. When this book changes, our policies change. So that's what Neola helps us do, because believe me, we probably would need several lawyers in-house all the time to stay up with this because of the ever-changing laws that occur. State Board of Accounts audits school districts and other government agencies every 2 years. These audits can be found at that website, and typically our audits have to do with, our audit citations have to do with federal grants, have to do with having enough people for various checks and balances, and as a small school district and other small school districts, typically those are the comments that are in our audits, but you can go to that website and see all the audits of all of the different government agencies that get audited. And then the Department of Local Government Finance provides financial oversight of all local government units. We do what we do because a lot of that. We are probably the most regulated institution in the state of Indiana, maybe outside of a bank. I don't know the banking side of it, but it's pretty heavy stuff. And so you got to make sure that you have people in place, you have the experts in place helping you maneuver through all of this. Because if you do this on your own, you will get in trouble if you don't follow a certain law, a certain requirement. So we make sure as administration and legal reviews, et cetera, that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing based upon all of this. And I want to congratulate our school board because they have been recognized since 1994 as an outstanding school board by the ISBA. That's because of the training that we go through and making sure that we're adhering to all of these requirements. So congratulations, school board, and our goal is to continue that process as we move forward. So how are decisions made? So per Indiana code, school boards hire superintendents, superintendents hire administration, and per Indiana code, we deal with the daily operations of the school. That's what we do. Sometimes people are happy, sometimes people aren't, but that's what the requirement is. And let me give you an example. A couple of years ago, our legislators changed Indiana code. And there was a couple of school boards wanting to fire their superintendent. And they found out in Indiana code that the legislators changed it, that the only persons who could recommend firing certified staff were building principals. So the school board went to the ISBA attorneys, went to legislators, went to a variety of sources and said, okay, so if we're going to non-renew our superintendent's contract, how do we do that? They had to get a building principal to make that recommendation because no one was watching how the law was written. So they've since got that fixed. But my point is, sometimes you get those crazy laws in there that you have to make sure that you're following, otherwise you would lose that battle in court. So the administration is charged with dealing with the daily operations. We look at Indiana Code, State Board of Accounts, the DLGF, the IDOE, state, federal law, school board policy requirements, etc. We ask for a legal review when necessary, and typically it's quite necessary, making sure that we're following all the state statutes. That could come from ISBA, that could come from Bob Riley, that could come from the Indiana Department of Education, just depends on the topic. Then the administration gathers data, we receive input from representatives of various stakeholders depending upon the topic, and we try to gather data that would support the recommendation. So like what you're going to hear tonight with the high school presentation, you're going to hear some data. It's based upon our strategic plan. It's based upon input received from various stakeholders. Some like it, some don't like it, but that's what happens when you make a decision. Per Indiana code, we also have to discuss specific topics with the West Lafayette Education Teachers Association, the WLEA. So I can't bring something to the school board for consideration until I have met those requirements. Once we've done all that, we put together a proposal. We revise the proposal based upon the input received. And like the proposal you're hearing tonight from the high school, I think it's changed at least 10 times, maybe more. And then the administration, through the superintendent's office, will bring to the school board a recommendation. You only in a public meeting can consider the proposal, and you can either accept or reject the proposal, or you can table it to get more information. I should add that. You can table it. But your authority is only in this public meeting. Your authority is not as individual board members. Your authority, per Indiana code, is here. So when you all get together and you hear a presentation and you hear a proposal, that's when you have the authority as a group to make a decision. And typically what the administration is doing before we get to this meeting is accepting phone calls from each of you if you have questions about these proposals. As we did with the high school proposal, each of you were invited to meet with the administration without violating Indiana code, fewer than 3, to hear the presentation and ask questions. It's an education piece. But your decision lies here when you meet in public. So our goal is always to make the final decision based upon what's doing best for all students. all students. Sometimes I use the phrase, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one or the few. And sometimes the needs of the one or the few outweigh the needs of the many. And you have to use data. You have to listen to the people doing the work. And what I'm very proud of, and I will stake my reputation on this, and I have plenty of teachers out here, I listen to the staff, those people doing the work. That's where I lean towards. If they tell me that, this is probably not a good idea, or we should do this. In teacher discussion, we do a lot of problem solving, and we come up with ideas and suggestions. And so I appreciate that communication, because in the end, like Dr. Deming would tell you, that you listen to the people doing the work, because in the end, they're the ones that are going to have to carry out whatever decision is made in this setting. So I try to listen as best I can to the teachers, to the staff, to the administration, and we go through that filter process with all of those different sets of rules. Now I want to give you some historical information. Believe it or not, school districts continue to thrive and survive throughout history. Our school district started in 1892, thereabout. And all of these dates have to do with a building, and either when they were built or there were expansion projects. And I'm sharing this with you is because 10 years from now, we will not be here probably. A new board will be here, new administration will be here, and they will be going through the same ebb and flow of student enrollment, ebb and flow of trying to improve buildings, or do you have to close buildings? And fortunately for us, we haven't expanded too much with buildings like the school district had back in the 70s. But they needed it because of their student enrollment. So I won't go through all this with you, but there are two things I want you to be aware of. Acts of 1959. Those acts created the school boundaries here in Tippecanoe County, and our school boundary is locked 3 square miles. This would take either legislative action or our neighboring school districts to say, yeah, you can come in and have more assessed valuation. Yeah, you can have more students, and I'll get into that shortly because we've had those conversations. So we cannot grow bigger than our boundary, which has been set since 1959. The second piece of this is, I found this very interesting and wanted to share this with you. 1970, our assessed valuation in the school district was over 37 million. Student enrollment was over 3,000. Look at this tax rate. Tax rate in 1970 was $7.42 per $100 of assessed valuation. We're at $1.27 and some change, and been that way consistently since about 2010, 2011. So I sure hate to have been here in 1970 when the tax rate was at $7.42. I have a feeling that maybe, well, maybe they were all right with it. Seems a little high to me. I wanted to give you the Blue Ribbon Task Force Committee. This was before I arrived in 2007, but 2004 to 2006, a group of stakeholders were asked to look at some topics with the school district because the school district was near having big financial issues for a variety of reasons, including state funding, loss of enrollment, other things that occurred in the history. So there was declining school revenue. There was the need to improve school facilities. The student enrollment was going down, and there was a discussion about if you're going to save dollars, since about 90% of the school budget is staff related, you're going to have to reduce staff. After 2 years of meeting and discussing with experts and looking at every variable, they came up with these 4 recommendations, and I won't read all of those to you, but 3 is the one that stands out. Consider expanding the boundaries. The school district boundaries are 3 square miles, which was, and it says legislative mandated, but it was the acts of 1959. Actually, I think you could take legislatively out. It was more of every school district had to come up with, or every county had to come up with their agreement with their neighboring school districts on how to have their boundaries. So in 59, Tippecanoe County carved out West Lafayette schools, carved out Lafayette schools, and carved out Tippecanoe County schools. We cannot expand our boundaries unless neighboring school districts agree, and we have discussed this. I won't give you my story about when I first got here to try to do this, but I really tried hard to do this with city council and our school district working together to expand our boundaries. It didn't go over real well. That's because neighboring school districts would lose resources. They would lose students, they would lose assessed evaluation, and as was said to me, and I agree, West Lafayette would not agree to giving up AV and resources to other school districts. So you either have to have a legislative mechanism or you have to get other school districts to agree to expand the boundary. And right now, that is not a possibility. So how do we make difficult decisions? So I want to take you through a time when we had to make a difficult decision in the school district. And for those that did not live through this, these memories are very clear in my mind. Because I came here in 2007, we had a $250,000 cash balance among all funds. As several financial experts told me, we were one disaster away from turning the keys over to the state. So we had to figure out what to do, and that was part of that Blue Ribbon Committee. Blue Ribbon Committee was already looking at it years prior. So when I came here, one of the things I said, I should ask more questions, and two, how are we going to maneuver through this? Because I don't want to be the superintendent that hands the keys over to the state. So then it got worse. In 2008, the governor announces that the state will take over all schools' general funds. The general fund is the heartbeat fund that paid for all of our teachers, our curriculum, and instruction. So the state says, hey, we're going to take that over. We're going to relieve property owners of property taxes. We're going to raise the tax rate from 6 to 7%. We're going to make sure you guys get the money that you need. Then we had a financial analysis conducted by Dr. DeBoer and Dr. Humbles. And they indicated in their analysis that high-performing school districts like our school district, we were going to lose significant state support over the next 10 plus years. That was really scary when they made those projections. And I'll share with you how they came to some of those decisions here in a little bit, or the data that shows that. So what we had to do in 2009, and I think some of my colleagues out there will remember this, we had to lay off 10% of our staff in 2009. It's one of the worst years of my life. I remember walking to each of the schools, having my letters of reductions in force, and telling teachers, I'm sorry, but you don't have a job next year. That was tough. But that was what we had to do in order to try to right that situation that was forthcoming. Fortunately, we had our foundation operational. Thank you, foundation. We came together and did the SOS, Save Our Schools. And in the summer of 2009, this little school district raised $217,000 in the summer to save teaching jobs. And People magazine even called one to come do a story, which I thought was great. We were able to save 7 teaching jobs through that $217,000 through some grants. However, that's one-time money. When that money is gone, what are you going to do? You're going to have to do it again. So I recommended a referendum not to exceed 43 cents per $100 assessed valuation. And that was the consensus, actually, of all of us internally working together to make that recommendation. But I wanted to take the heat for it because I wasn't sure how it was going to play out in our community. We held community forums to educate the community. We brought in financial experts, state education associations, ISBA, Indiana State Teachers Association, Superintendents Association, ASBO. We had our administration, we had state leaders, we had a lot of people at these community forums. I remember the high school auditorium being packed with people during these forums. And there were a lot of people upset. Let me tell you, this was not easy. Major opposition rose up against placing the referendum question on the May 4th ballot. The opponents spent nearly $140,000 against this referendum in 2010. That means we had to raise the same amount of money to counteract what they were saying, full-page ads, And I'm going to show you what the opposition said during the referendum campaign. And the reason I'm sharing this with you, school board, is because you're going to make difficult decisions in your career. And you're going to have people that oppose things because they don't like it. So you have to make the final decision as a representative of our students, of our teachers, of our staff, of the school district. Sometimes not everyone gets everything that they want. You have to make tough decisions. So what did our opposition say during the referendum campaign? I remember these because I, with hundreds of people, were knocking on doors, talking to people during the referendum campaign. Here's what they said. Businesses would leave. Well, I'm proud to tell you from the Greater Lafayette Chamber, businesses stayed per the data given to me by the GLC. They said that our property values are going to go down because of higher property taxes. Well, watch this video. I think this is actually 2017.
It's a housing trend that's usually associated with San Francisco or beachfront property, but it's happening a lot closer to home.
And we're talking about smaller, older properties being demolished and then replaced with much larger, brand new houses. They all have one thing in common. They're all inside the West Lafayette School District.
News 18's Dan Klein reports while a few have already hit the market and a few more are on the way, no one knows if this is just a brief passing phenomenon or truly a trend of the future.
So can you show me how you raise?
Seljan Guzzi and her family moved from Minnesota 18 months ago so that she and her husband could take jobs at Purdue. She moved into this home on Sunset Lane because she wanted her son in the West Lafayette School District.
We were kind of lucky, I think.
The Guzzi home was the first of its kind from Iron Gate Homes. Others have followed the mold. Buying an older, smaller home like this one at 2009 Salisbury Street, valued at $90,000, tearing it down and building one which listed at $430,000 in its place. Almost a 500% increase. Or from this 1,200 square foot home to this on Princess Drive.
This is the master.
Or this newly built 5-bedroom home at 1809 Salisbury, which is 4,800 square feet and lists for $530,000. In West Lafayette, demand is high, supply is low.
It's very much like beach properties, and because the reason that beach properties are valuable is because there's not very much beach, and so people go in and they take down these little houses. Well, it's the same deal here.
Because although West Lafayette recently annexed more land into the city, it did not shift the boundaries of the school district. But the developer says this blueprint cannot work for many properties, even in West Lafayette.
It's actually tricky. That's why we're not doing more than what we're doing. And I think that would be kind of difficult anyways, because although there's, you call it a phenomenon, I don't think that there's an overbearing need for it.
Because the initial price point has to be right, the lot size has to be large enough for a bigger home and 3-car garage, and of course, location, location, location. The closer to the high school, the better. And if that lot price is going to be too expensive, you're just going to have to say no.
Yes. Yep, it happens every day.
6 Iron Gate homes are in various stages of completion. Several more are in the works. Have you had any trouble selling these types of homes, even if it's $500,000 or more?
No, I've had no problems.
As long as the schools stay at the level that they are, there's always going to be a demand for West Lafayette properties.
As for Guzzi, she likes her home, she likes her neighbors, she likes living close to work.
Do you feel fortunate you're in this house?
Hiya. Me too.
And she's got no plans to move. Reporting in West Lafayette, Dan Klein, News 18.
And the trend is also helpful for the city. David Hood estimates that tax revenues on his new homes are as much as 5 times the amount as the older properties.
5 times the amount. Property values have gone up, and housing is at a premium in the West Lafayette schools. So I think that says something about our school district and the quality that we provide. Can we improve? Absolutely, and I'll get to those improvements. So they said that school district enrollment would decline because people would move out between that first referendum, 2011, 2017. We're up 257 students. They said board members would be replaced. No, school board members were reelected. They said that we would lose our academic ranking. And we have a new page on our website. So Niche ranks us #1 in the state 6 years in a row. And by the way, if you don't like Niche, just go to U.S. News World Report. And if you don't like U.S. News World Report, go to the Best Music Communities Award. If you don't like NAM, as they're called, the National Association of Music Merchants, go to Newsweek. They have good rankings for us. Oh, if you don't like Newsweek, go to the College Board. Oh, if you don't like them, go to the Indiana Department of Education. We do not rest on this, but this is one metric that we look at to see how we're doing academically statewide and nationally. And I remember a big group of patrons saying, don't do the referendum, sell Birchfield. Guess where you're studying? Birchfield. So we didn't do that because, again, that would have been one-time money. Once that's spent, you can't replicate it. So fortunately, we kept Birchfield and we kept the intermediate school. So what was the result? The school board kept the question on the ballot, 66% in favor with a landslide victory, and we continue to be successful because between 2008 and 2010, also in other times that I'll get into, 15 to 17, 20 to 21, the school board makes courageous decisions. Sometimes popular, sometimes not. And as a school board member, you have to figure out how you make those decisions. Progress comes at a price. You have to be willing to make tough calls and take the hits. Believe me, I know. Been doing this a long time. So here's a referendum message that I really like. I wanted to just share this with you. This is one of my favorites.
It's not just about what happens in the classroom that makes West Lafayette School such a great school system. It's the academics, it's the arts, it's the athletics, it's the wonderful music program. All these things really help prepare these kids for life. And there are a lot of things that we can invest in, but I can't think of anything more important for our children and for our community than invest in their education.
Great schools make our community a better place to live. Your yes vote is important.
Please vote yes!
I see a lot of our wonderful children that some of you may have noticed that were part of that. It was great. Let me give you some quick longitudinal data. So how's our special education enrollment been over the last few years? So this is where we were in 2008. Look at the climb. Every time this climbs, you have to be considering staffing. So you're going to be asked for staffing in elementary, you're going to be asked for staffing at intermediate school, you're going to be asked for staffing at the high school. Believe me, it happens every year with the building principals. They're not shy about asking for staffing. We have to try to balance the staffing because we have infinite needs and finite resources. So this shows you our climb in special education enrollment. And I think this is an anomaly, but we'll find out because this is where the pandemic hits and we see a decline happening right here sharply in a variety of data sets I'm going to show you. How about our number of students on free and reduced lunch? This is telling, in my opinion, for our school district. We're one of the highest achieving school districts in the state of Indiana with the highest number of students on free and reduced lunch percentage-wise. But one of the things I'm proud of is all students can now receive a hot breakfast or a hot lunch prepared on site, and we're no longer having to create a process where some students are separated, if you will, based upon a free and reduced lunch application. All of them can be served equally and well, and I'm very proud of that. Longitudinal data for student enrollment. You can see that our student enrollment starting in 2007 and 8 when I came here was here. We've had a steady incline up until about here, and then this pandemic hit, and a lot of these students we're finding are being homeschooled at this point, and so I'm hoping that clicks back up by the time we get out of the pandemic. We've added staffing every year despite dramatic budget cuts. You can see where we were in 2010, 2011, and every year we continue to increase. And despite the state funding cuts that I'll show you here shortly, we've been able to retain teachers, and we have kept ourselves from having to cut art, music, and extracurricular activities, which I'm very proud of. Certified staff information, this is on our website. You can see in 2020-21 that over 60% of our staff have 10 years plus of experience. This is interesting data, I think, because we started tracking in 15-16 this information, and our retention rate for staff is 93.4% in 19 and 20, and we ask our staff as they exit reasons for leaving, and then I also personally called a large group of these people to get some more information to find out if there was any other thing they wanted to tell me. And everyone that I called, I asked the question, did administration, lack of support of administration, drive you out of our school district? And everyone said no, it did not. So I asked, and that's what they told me. So I'll be happy to entertain other people who want to send in those conversations if you want to hear it. So one of the things I'm proud of is that we're maintaining a consistent tax rate since 2010, which includes our referendums. So our tax rate has remained consistent. We're not at $7.42 or wherever it was in 1970. It came from $1.70 when the state took over the general fund all the way down to $1.23, and then we clicked up a little bit, and we're now at $1.27 some change, and we've stayed consistent since 2010. Our debt service tax rate has stayed consistent since 2016 when we made the recommendations for the construction projects, and you'll get more information about our debt service tax rate shortly. Here's where we start getting into the meat of the matter with public schools, and specifically schools like West Lafayette. There's what's called the Basic Support Per Student, ADM, Average Daily Membership. In 2009, this is what we were getting per student on base ADM. As predicted by Dr. DeBoer and Dr. Hummels, we saw a decline, and it hit its peak, or lack of peak, in 2015, and it has inched its way back up. You can see where we did the two referendums in 2010, 2017. What's telling is we're not even back to where we were in 2009, in 2021. So that continues to be problematic for public schools, and it's going to even get worse in my opinion, and I'm going to share that with you here shortly. Our base AV history, this is our base, not with TIF district, but the base. We had a tick up, and then we had this little anomaly in 2018, and now it's been going up substantially since 2018. The reason for that dip is the base AV was moved out of our school district and put in TIF due to a county assessor's error. But they put it in the TIF district, so we did receive some revenue from that from the referendum. Because we had the fundraising from the foundation, we were able to continue on because we made up the difference. As AV goes up, the tax rate generates more revenue. So the AV TIF history is here, and you can see that it's exponentially going up, and if we can get this bill passed that allows this AV to kick back into our base, more likely than not, we would not need a referendum. So I'm hoping that something happens with a pass-through of the assessed valuation from the TIF back into the base. I asked Forecast 5 and Steve specifically to give a Forecast 5 to give us the top 8 school districts out of 289 with regards to average teacher salaries. West Lafayette is 8 out of 289 school districts for the highest average teacher salary. We can still do better, in my opinion. These other school districts are larger than us, other than Speedway, and Speedway has a 50 cent per $100 of assessed valuation. And I think they're a tad smaller than us, or right about the same size. What I'm proud of is over the past 10 years, our staff have received on average a wage increase of 3+% each year, thanks in part to the referendum and student enrollment growth. However, if we want to do more, we may need to consider asking for a higher referendum rate in 2024. However, I would say to you, this is a state problem. And the state problem has become local school districts' problems. And so I'm going to show you some of that data as well. Our average class sizes kind of do an ebb and flow. And again, you have to make decisions about, do we put it in special education? Do we put it into other areas? And so you can see the ebb and flow of our average class sizes per grade level, K through 6. And here it gives the overall correlation of all the numbers there. So we're staying on average K through 6 steady. I'd like to see this a little lower, but we also need to do something with state funding. We also need to do something with maybe a higher referendum in order to accomplish some of that. Now I want to give you an excerpt from Rise Above the Mark. Rise Above the Mark was an educational piece that we did to educate our community about vouchers, testing, charter schools. If you go to riseabovethemark.com, you can see some of that. But this is a financial analysis done by Dr. DeBoer and Dr. Hummels back in 2014, talking about the state issues, and we're now facing that.
In Indiana, legislators have taken the control of education funding away from local school boards, particularly the general fund. The general fund is the chunk of cash that pays for instruction, maintenance, and operating schools. The general fund is the heartbeat fund. It pays for the most important elements of teaching our kids. Historically, Indiana schools have been funded with local property taxes. But recently, the legislature removed the heartbeat fund from local property taxes and shifted local control to state house control. This gave legislators the power to shift and thus cut money from this critical fund that pays for our teachers. What that means is it's difficult to track what is happening with the money that's the backbone which enables our schools to exist. David Hummels and Larry DeBoer, economists at Purdue University, led an analysis of Indiana school funding. Their findings show that despite the rhetoric of Indiana politicians, over the last 10 years, education funding has been reduced dramatically, with the biggest cuts coming to our highest achieving schools.
I want to go back 15 years to 1998. In that year, the average per pupil spending in the state was about $4,700 per kid. I think it's a little easier to think of that in terms of how much money does a single classroom get. So let's take an average classroom, 21, 22 kids. That's right around $100,000 for that classroom. Now, that probably seems like a lot of money, but it pays for a teacher. It pays for any instructional aides, teachers' aides in the classroom. It pays for physical education and music and art and the cafeteria and the library and the school principal and the counselors and any maintenance. Basically, almost everything the school does is going to come out of that $100,000 per classroom. So, 1998, $100,000. And over the next 5 years, up through 2002, 2003, the money edged up very slowly. And so by 2002, you were looking at about $107,000 per classroom, just slightly keeping ahead of inflation. At that point, 2002 is really the high watermark for education funding in the state of Indiana. And everything since then has been downhill. So probably the simplest way to think about it is if you just look at the dollar values put into the schools, it looks like the dollar values are slowly moving upwards. $50 this year, $100 next year, that sort of thing, per child. But then you have to take into account that costs of running the schools are rising sharply over time. Inflation is eating away the value of those dollars. So inflation is this kind of termite that slowly eats away at the value of the dollars being spent. The energy needed to heat and light the buildings is getting more expensive. Textbook costs are going through the roof. Health insurance premiums more than doubled in that period, and they went from 20 to 30% of personnel costs. Okay, so energy, textbooks, health insurance costs, those are all inflationary costs that are out of control of the schools. There's nothing the school can do really to avoid incurring those costs. So what we have, once you take into account those rising costs, those termites eating away at the value of the dollars. Our classroom that had $100,000 in 1998 and $107,000 in 2002 is down all the way to about $82,000. In 10 years, that's a cut of almost a quarter of the money available to the average classroom to educate those kids. In addition to that, you have, over the last several years, a number of episodes in which there were sharp, unpredicted, and difficult to accommodate cuts. So in the recession, we had a $300 million cut to the schools. And then again the year after that, and again the year after that. And so the accumulated cuts there were nearly $1 billion. But a simple way to think about the impact of those cuts is to ask how much of the state's total income is being devoted to these educational expenses. If we go back to 2002, the high watermark for funding, it was only 2.7% of state's total income in Indiana. Today, it's more like 2.2%. So this has been a conscious political decision to devote less and less of our state's resources to funding education. So how does a school adjust to those kinds of steady, every year cuts in the resources available to teach? So what do? You cut the supply budget. You go from offering PE and music and art 3 days a week down to 2 days a week. You decide, I can't afford to send my teachers to a conference to learn new instructional technology for math and science classrooms. Maybe you used to have a teacher's aide in the classroom who could help with kids who are falling behind with reading and math. Well, you let go of the teacher's aide, so now there's no one to help with that remediation. You let class sizes grow just a little bit. You don't double them in size. You add a few more kids to every classroom. And so every day, each kid gets just a little bit less time from their teacher. And you encourage experienced teachers to retire so that you can replace them with low-cost novice instructors. None of that's a disaster. None of that is anything you could point to and say, my school's terrible now. It's just termites eating at the foundation of educational quality. And as we know, termites can stay down there in the basement for year after year after year, and eventually the building collapses.
And I'm afraid that's exactly where we're headed. I fear that over the next few years, rural schools will be closing because of the current legislation that's being considered. I'm going to hit that here real quick. But again, this is our state funding issue that has occurred over the course from 2009 to where we are. Our costs have gone up every year, but yet our state funding has decreased every year, and those are the termites eating away at education quality. Dr. DeBoer put together a couple of charts for me. This is a ranking of state support per public school ranked from highest to lowest. In 2015, we ranked 4th to the lowest in the state for total state support per student funding. So I was kind of hoping that by 2020 we'd be better off, so I asked him to do it again, and this is what he sent me a while back. We went down. We're now the 3rd lowest in the state for state support per pupil. Our public schools are getting starved to death financially, and yet costs go up. Unfortunately, we have a community that supports a referendum that's helped us bridge that gap. But these are the conversations that I wish our patrons would have with our legislators, because the real issue is this. If we don't fix this, we're going to continue to do what I call the referendum dance, and this is going to get worse because of how our legislators are funding public schools. This is a funding formula simulation. So if you look at 2021, this is what they're predicting we're getting with regards to ADM, base ADM, and they're saying in 2022, we're going to see a 10% increase. Let me show you how those numbers work. If we want to get the 14.7 million, and we want to go up 10%, our ADM has to go up from 2,253 to 2,425. That's 172 students that we have to grow by next year in order to make that work. And since I've been here, we've never gone above 80. We had one year where we had 80, and typically we're between, 20 and 30 in that range. So even though it's a projection, those numbers don't play out unless we grow by 172 students. And I hope we do. That'd be great. The Indiana Coalition for Public Education has this chart. I love it. I won't go through it, but It's a bucket showing the leaking of state support from public schools into various legislative initiatives that are being considered, looked at. So this just came out by the Associated Press. Indiana voucher plan could take 1/3 of schools' funding boost. That means $144 million plus could go to the voucher program, and there's only 10% of our students in the state that are associated with that. In a time when the Governor's Commission said we need $600 million in this state to increase teacher salaries, and they said there's no money for that, we have legislators trying to pass this bill. This was an interesting article, and I've had some people say, how did Dr. Hummels come up with the 2.2%? This actually says it. When you adjust for inflation, Indiana's spending per student is down more than 7% since 2010. We dropped from 22 down to 36 between 2004 to 2018. And it wasn't in the report, but the Indiana's gross domestic product dropped from 2.6 to 2.2% since 2010 in public school funding. This has been a conscious political decision. So if you take into account inflation, Indiana's spending $1.3 billion less per year on education than we should have had if they hadn't been doing some of this. So those of you that are hearing my voice, I ask you, please contact Indiana legislators, oppose House Bill 1005, Senate Bill 412, and Senate Bill 413. I am hearing that this bill may be killed, but this is the education savings accounts that is being proposed. This is that funding, expanding the voucher program, and I think everyone received a handout with information. Please contact your legislators and tell them to quit diverting public school funding to this privatization. And I'd like to thank our representatives, Senator Alting, Representatives Clinker and Campbell, for fighting against this, because they are supporting Indiana public schools. Thanks to our referendum, we've been able to bridge that gap, but one of every $5 of our budget comes from the referendum, and without the referendum, our average class sizes will increase dramatically, and larger class sizes make it more difficult for our students to get the help that they need. We use scientific polling to see how we're doing with our community. In 2010, we asked our community, how do you think we're doing as a school district? 71% said that they gave some kind of approval, whether it was strong approval or somewhat approval. So in 2017, we did scientific polling again using a stratified, random stratified sample. And I'm proud to say between 2010 and 2017, our total approval went up to 92%, and this is one way we check with those 75% of the people without kids in school. How are we doing? Now, we'll probably do that again after we get through the pandemic, because emotions are high and people are still emotional about the reopening of schools and that sort of thing. But remember, we did a referendum here, and we did another referendum in building construction projects here, and you can see the increase. So that's one piece of data we consider. Let me quickly go through the strategic planning committee process, and then we're going to get Jane Hernan on the phone. If April, you can tell her, we'll be with her in about 3 to 4 minutes. We use 47 members of our community to come together as representatives to create a facilities plan. We asked them to develop a plan that our community would support, and on October 3rd, 2016, I presented the committee's recommendations to the school board for consideration. So our committee came up with 3 global parameters. I won't read all of these to you, but basically it was replacing our buildings or remodeling our buildings, maintaining our academic excellence, keeping our corporation debt service tax rate at or below the current level as of 2016. We held 5 community forums. We held multiple community organizational meetings. We met with community members. We had nearly 1,000 people in attendance in all the meetings. We also met with our staff. We met with administration, teachers to get their input. Did we accept everyone's input? No, because we couldn't do everything, because we didn't have enough financing to do everything. Like, for instance, one of the patrons wanted this building to be on stilts, so it would go up and down during a storm. That was going to cost tens of millions of dollars, and we couldn't do it. So how do we build do building projects in Indiana by large donations or selling secured bonds. I'd like to thank the foundation for helping us so far up to date, 2.5 million pledged. After the pandemic, we're hoping to get working again and get up to 5 million where we would like to be. The process used, we used our facilities committee. We had Dr. Ed Eiler facilitate those meetings over 2 years. We received input from representation of stakeholders to help us build the plan. And then we held 3 additional community meetings with Birchville residents after the 5 community forums. So we did have coverage. This wasn't done without people's knowledge. We seek input on school renovations. That's from the Journal Courier. This gives you the first 4 that we did right there. We also had Journal Courier do a report on Happy Hollow and what we were working on. And then we had on our website this, and then the 5th community forum was here. We had the facility scorecard, we had the study data, we had the presentations that we did. We had our architects working with us to estimate costs. We had Baker Tilly, and we had Ice Miller, our expert advisors in bond counsel and finance, guide and lead and direct us in this. In early 2016, the estimate came in at about $50 million in 2016 dollars for the work we wanted to do. And then at the October 3rd, 2016 public meeting, where patrons did speak, I made the following recommendations. And this is on our website. I won't read all of these to you, but the 2 I want to emphasize: if the assessed valuation increases, which it has, use the additional resources to bond for additional expansion of projects. And then the administration believes in the coming years that the same debt service tax rate that now generates or supports just under $50 million will also generate additional revenue without increasing the tax rate. And if this holds true, then we'll be able to do more. And that basically is what's been happening. Our AV's gone up, the costs went up. This is our AV history in a straight line approach. There was that dip here, but we had fundraising going on. And why did we invest? To improve our school safety and well-being of our students, teachers, and staff, to improve the learning environment, to add capacity to accept students. We retired debt. By the way, when you retire debt, school districts don't retire. We continue on, as that historical information shows. And we wanted to stay nationally competitive with the best school districts in America. The control project versus the referendum project, if we had went with a referendum process and had people vote on it, it would have been outside the tax caps, and property taxes would have gone up to 21% higher. I didn't make up that figure. That was from our tax experts who did the analysis. So we kept it within a control project, and both control project and referendum process use a building holding corporation when selling secure bonds. We held public hearings on all 4 bonds, 2 hearings per bond. As the AV increased, we were able to bond for nearly $84 million to cover increase in construction costs. Why did the construction costs increase? That was because that we saw 30 plus. It's actually much higher as we got into 1920, but it started out at 30. We're probably close to over 40% in cost because of tariffs on steel, shortage of construction workers, and increased cost of materials and labor. Bonds, we have approximately $78 million in construction bonds. We have additional costs in furniture, supplies, minor renovations. We have about $3.5 million left over from the bond proceeds, which can be used towards debt service payments. And here's where you have to understand that, and you're going to hear this more from Brock from Baker Tilly here shortly, we can maintain our debt service tax rate with a variety of things. We can use the leftover bond proceeds to pay down debt, and this waiver of $600,000 in circuit breaker from debt service can come off. We have a continual increase in AV, which is projected, and Brock will talk more about that here shortly. We can continue leasing Happy Hollow, or there's what's called refinancing or repurposing the 2017 bonds, which would decrease our annual payment by almost $500,000 without increasing the amount of time that it will take to pay off those bonds. You'll hear about that shortly. So I would like to get Jane Hernan on the phone and ask her to quickly, because she has a meeting at 7. She's our bond counsel. She's with Ice Miller, and she's on the phone because she's working with another school district. I've asked her to quickly talk about the difference between a control project, a referendum, holding corporations, and the process used by West Lafayette Schools for construction. Jane, can you hear me? Boop, boop, boop. Jane, can you hear me? Boop, boop, boop. Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Jane, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
We can, barely. We're going to get you up a little bit. You're here at our board work session. I was wondering if you could just briefly talk to, as a bond counsel, attorney, talk with our board about our process used, difference between referendum and control project and holding corporation.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you allowing me to join through audio. Hopefully you can hear me okay. There's quite a bit of feedback.
We're going to try to fix it here. Try it now. Jane, are you there? Oh, she got disconnected. Let's try it again. Let me call her on the phone. Oh, she's come back. Jane, are you there?
Yes. Sorry, there was quite a bit of feedback.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. I appreciate you allowing me to call in, and I wanted to go over just a handful of items. First of all, as bond counsel, in order for us to give our opinion to bondholders at the time of a closing, we have a fairly high standard that we have to go through to be able to give that opinion. And it's opinion on the validity of the bonds and the validity of the lease, which is used to repay those bonds. And the standard is such that any court properly briefed could not conclude otherwise that the bonds were valid. And as part of our diligence process, in order to give that opinion, we're required to gather proofs of notices in the newspaper, minutes, resolutions of the school board and the building corporation, and all the signed documentation. And I can tell you that West Lafayette Schools went through all the required processes in doing their projects and financing those projects. That includes multiple public hearings, multiple public meetings, notices in the newspaper as required by the law. And in fact, unlike a lot of school corporations, all of the planning meetings included multiple school board members, which is really relatively unusual. They went through all the needed processes to allow taxpayers and voters the opportunities to participate. That includes, under current law, all projects that have a threshold of more than $16,727,000 have to be opened up to the possibility of voters or taxpayers requesting the referendum process. And West Lafayette went through that process, and they did not have the required petition filed forcing projects to go to a referendum. In the last couple of weeks, I've had a reason to do a little digging into data across the state that you might find interesting, and did some gathering of about 77 school corporations across the state of Indiana. And of those, 18 school corporations requested projects be put on the ballot themselves. In other words, they ran a referendum election. 58 of those went through the 30-day process. Taxpayers did not request any kind of petition, and therefore they were able to move forward without a referendum election. And one of those had a situation where a petition was actually filed by opposition groups to put the question on the ballot. What that statistics doesn't tell you is the number of schools who may have had community meetings, who may have decided to cut back or reduce projects to get to the point where they were able to get through that 30-day period. It also doesn't tell you whether the school corporation was increasing the tax rate or not. And that does make a difference. In my experience, projects that get that application petition by taxpayer groups are usually in three categories. One is community is mad about something else besides the project. Maybe it's because a basketball coach was fired or some other reason. And this is a chance to be listened to. Sometimes we see people file petitions because it's going to increase an individual's tax bill. And then the third reason is scope. Community members think that something about the project is unnecessary or more than what is needed. But we see many, many school corporations, especially those that have debt coming off, and that new debt can be done in a way that does not necessarily increase the payments above what is currently being paid, that get through that 30-day process. And I know a representative from Baker Tilly's there. I'm sure he can talk more about inside the debt caps and outside the tax caps. But that is some information you might find helpful. I've also understand there's been some questions about building corporation, so I want to just mention that. Basically, every school corporation in the state of Indiana at some time or another have used this building corporation lease mechanism to issue their bonds. And in fact, this lease building corporation structure was first approved in the 1950s by our Indiana Supreme Court. The building corporation members are typically community members, and they're not for profit, so they are not getting any dollars in their own pockets. In fact, all of the bond proceeds are held with a trustee bank, or in some cases in the school corporation's hands, but they're not held by individual building corporation members or the corporation as a whole. They're held in trust. And looking back in our files, we found an opinion that we gave in 1960 for a junior high school building corporation of West Lafayette for $1,400,000. And a building corporation was used at that time all the way back into 1960. Now, what's sort of interesting about that is the maturity of the bonds went to 1990, so they were 30-year bonds, which we really don't do very often anymore. But I wanted to give you a high-level look at that. To my experience, West Lafayette went through absolutely all the legal requirements. The state, when they allow the debt service levy to be in place, also asks for copies of those proofs of publication and those resolutions as well to make sure all things had been done correctly. And in my experience, having those board members being part of the planning process is unique, and it allowed for, in some ways, a much more transparent process than in some other districts. So that really is what I was going to cover. Be glad to try to answer questions if it's a little bit difficult over the phone. Like I said, I appreciate you allowing me to call in.
Any questions for Jane while she's on the phone, board members? Jane, thank you very much. I'll make sure that they have your phone number in case they have individual questions to ask. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you all.
All right,
bye-bye.
Take care. We're going to try to get to our student recognition here just shortly. I'd like to go through the debt service analysis with Brock, and then if the board would entertain consideration to take a pause during the work session so that we can recognize our students, Alan can make that recommendation to you, and then we can recognize our students and their families, because I think that's very important since they're here on time and we're running late. I want to make sure that we honor our students and what they're doing in our schools. But I want to turn this over to Brock because I want to give him an opportunity to hit the debt service tax rate. Brock is with Baker Tilly. Baker Tilly is our financial advisor. Remember, the school board did not make the decisions about bonding and the financial projections. We didn't make it up. We had financial advisors do that. Brock, the clicker's right there. I will give you this microphone as soon as I wipe it clean for you, and you can click and it will take you to your slides. It will be the right side clicker.
Thank you. Everybody hear me okay? Thank you, Dr. Killian. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. Again, my name is Brock Balsher with the firm Baker Tilly, formerly Umball. We serve as financial advisors to the school corporation. We are not bankers or underwriters, so we only serve in advisory capacity. I think what you'll hear this evening as part of my presentation is the exact content you heard in prior years, going back to the original project planning. And for the couple new board members, just be aware that we throw a lot of terms at you, so please don't hesitate to ask questions. And again, it's going to be very much in line with what you've previously heard. The four items that I'll cover this evening are assessed value projection, looking at our existing debt service, then looking at some cash flow projections, again, consistent to prior project planning. Then we'll wrap it up with looking at some illustrations on, back to a point Dr. Killian made, that there could be some opportunities in the coming years, as very similar to your own home mortgage, opportunities to refinance and save on interest dollars. So we're working with a firm that we do a lot of work with that looks at parcel by parcel analysis. We see and expect the West Lafayette School Corporation net assessed value to grow here in the coming years, very similar to what we experienced. You see two bar charts here. The light blue represents the non-exempt, we call, net assessed value. So this is the non-TIF AV, again, represented by the light blue. The gray is the TIF AV that's expected to grow as well. What we did highlight on this chart is the expected percentage growth year by year from 2022 and beyond. So you heard the strong case made on the news network about residential growth. We expect that level of residential growth to continue, but overall we expect the net assessed value to grow by 3.6% approximately per year going forward. So it allows us to help manage that tax rate, as you heard Dr. Killian mention a moment ago. So breaking down each characteristic of that net assessed value, you can see this top line represents the residential growth that we're expecting for that continued overall growth of 4% per year. So in West Lafayette, the residential property for net assessed value is about 17% of the total net assessed value. The orange line is TIF AV. Again, that's not part of our discussion for this evening, but you can see that TIF AV is expected to grow as well. Excuse me, the blue line is residential. This green line is represented by the largest taxing piece of net assessed value, and that is NAV2 or non-farm NAV2 because it's subject to the 2% tax cap. So that is your long-term care and rental property. So again, that represents about 36% of the total net assessed value for West Lafayette. Ag land or farmland, which is a very, very, very small percentage of almost zero. That's why you cannot see it in the graph too well. So with that, on net assessed value growth of about 3.6% per year, you can see our existing debt. For those in the crowd who can't see it very well, our 2021 total annual payments are about $5.9 million. So strategically, this board made a decision to allow payments to grow within that 20-year required time period for repayment. You heard Jane Herndon mention that very few bonds in the state of Indiana are still paid over 30 years, perhaps like your mortgage. In the state of Indiana, bonds have to be paid back in 20 years. So all bonds are, for the past 4 years, from 2017 to 2020, all are structured within that required repayment period. So we see that our payments are growing through time. However, that was done again strategically to align with what we expect our net assessed value to do through that same time period. This chart might be a little bit easier, but we know that West Lafayette has a total of 6 securities that we're paying back from 2021 through 2029. So as the payments increase, you've already heard that we expect net assessed value to grow by 3.6% per year. That you'll see in the coming slides allows us to manage that tax rate to what taxpayers are currently paying in 2021. So these bars, again, represent the outstanding debt as of today. We added 2 lines on this chart as well. This orange or red line represents the percentage of debt to net assessed value. There's not a hard, fast rule for the percentage that schools need to target. However, a lot of schools that we work with target a 12 to 15% debt to net AV ratio. And we can see in 2021, we're around 12% for West Lafayette School Corporation. A more relevant percentage is represented by this black line, and that is representative of our debt to gross assessed value or market value for the West Lafayette School Corporation. In 2021, we're right around 6%. And an independent agency that rates bonds across the state of Indiana and the United States target that a school corporation with approximately 6% debt to gross assessed value ratio is considered to only have a moderate amount of debt. So again, we're not in that high category or even that moderately high category. So S&P, that you'll see, views in 2021 West Lafayette to have just a moderate amount of debt. In that same vein, how West Lafayette compares to Indiana peers for the rating based upon a number of metrics. Debt to gross assessed value is just one of them, but cash balances, they analyze the administration team and forward planning. West Lafayette School Corporation has one of the best ratings in the state of Indiana, one of the 27 highest rated bonds in the state of Indiana at a double A minus rating. That is considered very high grade credit according to Standard & Poor's. So again, one of the best in the state of Indiana, top 11%. So now that we know what we expect from net assessed value, we can begin to look at, based upon a number of assumptions. I won't read all of these individually. However, to hit highlights, again, we're expecting that approximately 3.6% net annual growth for our AV. We're keeping our debt payments as is, so we're not making any assumptions that refundings are going to occur in the future. So being very conservative in our approach on how we plan to manage the debt service tax rate going forward. We do want to keep in there West Lafayette, like many school corporations across the state of Indiana, does continue to budget for interest on temporary loans. There hasn't been a need to use that in prior years. However, if the county or state were ever late on collections, there may be a need for short-term borrowing. So we continue to budget for it, essentially as an insurance policy to ensure that we can maintain cash flow. Also want to highlight in certain scenarios, in 2 and 3, there is an assumption that the school corporation will use at least $2.3 million of unused bond proceeds or donations to continue to manage the cash in our debt service fund. So with that being said, in scenario 1, you heard Dr. Killian mention the protected tax waiver. In this scenario, we are not assuming that we're transferring money from debt service to operations as allowable by the state of Indiana. In this scenario, the gray bars represents the outstanding debt that the team just viewed a couple slides ago. The black line is the annual debt service levy that we are projecting. Then the orange line is represented by the estimated debt service tax rate. So we're keeping the 0.5375 debt service tax rate level through 2025 before we start seeing decreases as a result of that net assessed value growth. This last line represents our estimated cash balance at the end of every calendar year or budget year based upon the net assessed value and tax rate projections. So assuming that we are not making a transfer from the protected tax waiver, we can maintain our 0.375 tax rate as this board is familiar with. However, we'll end up spending our cash balance down to a pretty low amount that we're assuming in 2023. Looking at another scenario, based upon our baseline projections, no protected tax waiver, and using at least $2.3 million of bond proceeds and or donations. This chart's built the same way. In the gray, the bars are represented by the existing debt. The black line represents our estimated debt service levy. The orange line is our estimated debt service tax rate. And you can see in this scenario, because we are using unused proceeds and donations, we can maintain a much stronger cash balance there in the blue, opposed to the prior slide where we saw we would be spending it down to a pretty low amount or tight amount in 2023. So in this scenario, our tax rate will begin to drop around 2024 or 2025. So really good position financially comparing the levy and the tax rate because of that net assessed value growth. In this last scenario, we're assuming that we are going to transfer as allowable by the state of Indiana through 2023 approximately $600,000 per year from the debt service to the operations fund. That helps us maintain transportation services, replace buses, maintain buildings in our operations fund. This chart's built the same way. Gray bars represent outstanding debt as of today. The black line is our estimated debt service tax levy. Orange line is our estimated debt service tax rate. And we're still staying within what the board and the community wanted with that 0.5375 before we start seeing a drop in tax year 2026. But using our cash balance to transfer to operations and relying upon some bond proceeds that have been unused and donation, we can still maintain a strong operating balance year to year as a result. So in all three scenarios, we're maintaining the current debt service tax rate. However, the only variable that changes between the three is the blue line, or how we plan to manage the operating balance or cash balance year to year. So again, very close to in line with what this board has previously seen before the projects were moved forward. Here's the actual cash balance. I know that's probably a little bit difficult to see. So this is the spreadsheet on how we're working with Mr. Sloat on projecting the tax levy year to year. I'll just draw your attention to this highlighted or bolded line that represents how we're estimating $2.3 million of unused bond proceeds and or donations to continue to support the debt service fund if needed, if the board chooses this route for that third scenario that you saw. Now looking at some refunding estimates, we issued bonds in 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020. How municipal bonds differ a little bit from home mortgages is you can refund your home mortgage whenever there's savings and whenever the bank will allow you to do it. For municipal bonds, they typically have what's called a call date where you can refund those around 10 years typically once they're issued. So in 2017, these will have a call date in 2027. So if we waited until 2027 and interest rates remain where they are, West Lafayette School Corporation can save an estimated $550,000 per year based upon the remaining repayment structure. Now, the further you get out or further before that call date you refund those bonds, it's less efficient, which means you don't generate as much savings. However, you could generate savings as early as refunding these in 2022. So if there was a need to generate savings, we could look at refunding. And if rates remain where they are for the 2017 bonds, we could save an estimated $56,000 in interest per year for the life of the existing maturities. Similar with the 2018 bonds, if we wanted to refund, generate savings in 2022, we could do that and save an estimated $14,400. However, if we waited till the call date, we could generate savings of approximately $263,000. For the 2019 bonds, the soonest we see savings being able to be generated is in 2027 of around $26,000. However, if we were to wait till the call date, we can save an estimated $126,000. Then last here, 2020 bonds, we could generate an estimated $47,000 in the call date in 2030. You can see before that, not much savings is generated just because of the size of the bonds and how low the interest rate was at the time of the sale. So looking at these scenarios, for those who like to see percentages rather than hard dollar figures, you can see in 2017, if we wanted to refund now, we can save an estimated 1.7%. But if we can wait until 2027, when these refunding becomes more efficient, we can save an estimated 16%. Then 1% to 19% on the 2018 bonds on the percentage of net present value. In 2019, we're not going to save much until 2027 at just over 2%. In 2020, for the 2020 bonds, don't generate any savings, as you heard, until 2029 or 2030. We have some additional supplemental information I don't plan to go through in detail, but for those who like to read the common terms, this information's in there. And happy to answer any questions, to highlight interest rates, how low they are right now. And I think we've seen that and heard that rates have ticked up a little bit, but it's still near historic lows. So the timing of when the 2019 and 2020 bonds were sold, they were near historic lows, so a really good time to sell and really save interest when we targeted those sale dates with the administrative team.
Fund after we meet our obligation. What are we supposed to keep in there?
Yeah. I'll go ahead and repeat the question.
Yeah.
Didn't hear. Question is what is the recommendation on the amount of cash reserve a school corporation should maintain? Excuse me. The Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, is a group we subscribe to and follow their guidance, and also S&P, Standard & Poor's, the rating agency. They both recommend and target a 15% cash balance, or at least 15%, because you want to maintain at least 2 months of reserves on your books to help stabilize the school corporation, as you heard Dr. Killian, to protect against any budget cuts or delay in collections or delay in revenue? Very good question.
Brock, just to reemphasize, if we did the refund, you're not extending your payments out longer like you would do a mortgage.
That's exactly right. So in certain scenarios, if you wanted to generate savings, you may take, if there are 25 years left of your mortgage, you might extend it to 30 years where you're saving every month. However, totality, you're saving, you're spending more on interest. In every one of these scenarios, we're keeping the existing payment structure and length of payment the exact same. So it's truly just a savings and interest.
Right. Which to me is the prime factor of all of this that we talk about. 15, 16, 17 is this is, if you will, interest rates hold and are favorable to us. We'll be able to easily accomplish all the things that we've been trying to do with the construction and the expansion of the project, plus the additional assessed valuation. And if the legislators do the pass-through TIF AB, that'll be huge. So that'll help us with debt service as well.
All day, we assume the rates would remain level, like where they are today.
Yeah, we just to give us a basis of comparison, compare apples to apples. We assume today's interest rates, and there's some sensitivity analysis we can perform as rates fluctuate month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year, as you know.
Right, okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Brock? Brock, thank you very much.
Thank you, my pleasure.
And I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Carpet because we do want to get to our students. They have school tomorrow on their graciously vacations here, and then we'll jump back into some things, maybe take a break and come back. Mrs. Carpet, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, we'll bring in Mr. Schreiner and Shelby, and the floor is yours so we can make these presentations.
Perfect. All right, let's lighten the mood a little bit.
Why don't you say that?
That's a lot of numbers. At this time, I'd like to represent or recognize our Westside Waco Award recipients. So this award was created to recognize students who have exemplified good citizenship qualities that are at the core of the mission of the school district. 3 students were selected by their teachers and administrators from each of the buildings. And when your name is called, we're going to start at high school this time. Last time it was at elementary. When your name is called, you'll come up. The administrator will say the words about your student, and then the students can stay. I'll take some pictures with all 3 students and the administrator, and then I'll send the family later today or tomorrow.
Thank you. This is fun. I have certificates for statistician. At any rate, we have several students we want to recognize in all of our schools tonight. First, Chaz. Chaz, if you come up. While you're coming up, Chaz, just for background, Chaz is an in-person, on-site 10th grade student in our school. And some comments by your teachers, Chaz, that have led us to this award tonight. Chaz not only leads by example in his classes, he appropriately encourages classmates to do the same thing. Chaz is respectful to everyone and carries himself as a model to others. He is one of the hardest working students at West Lafayette. He asks for help. Now, there's a big one right there. He asks for help. It's extremely polite. Not everybody asks for help, although we have all kinds of polite kids. He always does the right thing. He is personable and always comes in and greets us when he enters the room. Chaz is truly Red Devil pride. So congratulations. Next, Anas Albayan. Anas, if you would come up. And 8th grade student, another on-site person. student in our school. He comes to class full of energy and is encouraging to those around him on a daily basis. He sticks around after the class to make sure desks are lined up and chairs are back in place. That's another rare one, just like asking for help. Honest is always first to volunteer and help out anytime I need a student to pass back papers or run to the office or even just help a student who was absent. Honest is an all-around great kid and it's such a joy to have him in my class. He has a fantastic attitude and is well liked by teachers and classmates alike. So congratulations. And also from the junior senior high school, we're really pleased to have Lauren Kish here tonight. Lauren is a junior at our school, and she is a virtual learner this time. And some of the comments, Lauren, that we have from about you for this month, we have Lauren sees the struggles of others and sets her mind to doing something to help. This year, thanks to Lauren, 20 accessible swings for kids with disabilities were installed in West Lafayette, and West Point parks. To accomplish this, Lauren raised over $24,000 over a period of time to make this happen. She is a true example of the kind of citizenship we should all strive towards. And although I mentioned that you're a junior, Lauren, of course, these kind of accomplishments could be done just in 1 year. So this is truly a lifetime work that you've done to reach this incredible amount of money that you've raised. And thank you and congratulations.
If anyone mentions feeling left out, Liam will be the first to find something for that person to do. He can be quiet, which I think every teacher appreciates sometimes, but he is a leader. Liam listens carefully to lessons and tries his best with his work. He also has a great sense of humor. He always seems to be smiling, and his positive attitude seems to spread to those around him. Congratulations, Liam. David Fajardo Arenas, can you please come forward? David is a virtual student in Mrs. Kinson's class. David is kind and helpful to his classmates and his teacher. He gives 110% effort in class and asks questions when he doesn't understand. His excitement for learning is contagious, and his hard work in e-learning, which we all know is a hard task this year, has been recognized. So we're very proud of you, David. Thank you. Josephine Seymour, come on up. Josie is a sixth grader in Mrs. Hollingsworth's class. She is a hard worker who always is going above and beyond expectations. She is kind to everyone and has a quiet leadership power that pulls others to want to achieve. She doesn't let anything get her down. We're very proud to have her be our 6th grade representative tonight. Congratulations, Joseph.
She always talks positively about her family, her pets, and her classmates, and offers compliments to others. It is so impressive to see how hardworking and resourceful she is, while we must adapt to our activities virtually. Let's celebrate Lorelai. Next, I'd like Charlize to come on up. Charlize Erickson is in Mrs. Wayman's first grade classroom. She is so kind to all. She is caring, thoughtful, and such a hard worker. Lunchroom supervisors and special teachers are always telling Mrs. Wayman how helpful she is to them. She is very deserving. She has a great heart. She is often quiet but participates in discussions and always has a thoughtful response. She is a solid role model in class and is quick to share her artwork. She is a good and very kind person.
Very good. Thank you all for coming out and doing this. I'm going to ask Representative Klinker to come up and say a few words, and then we're going to take a break so that people can have a restroom break. And those of you that don't want to stay for the rest of this riveting meeting, you can go home and have some fun or do what you would like to do. And then we also put the signature sheet out for the school board meeting. So if there's anyone wishing to sign up for that during the break, you can do that. We'll take a break and then we'll come back and finish the work session and then get the school board meeting. So Representative Klinker, come on up.
Thank you. You want me to speak on that one?
Good evening, everyone, and congratulations to the parents and the students. I want their names so I can get you a certificate from the State House. We're very proud of each and every one of you and proud of the parents who have certainly helped the children to achieve that wonderful award tonight. Let me just say briefly that we are worried about this particular session. I just want you to know, adjusting for Indiana, that Indiana's spending per student is down more than 7% since 2010. You heard Dr. Killian say that. But Indiana dropped from 22nd nationally in school spending per student in 2004 to 36th in the United States by 2018. And that does affect many of us. Personally, I have 3 grandchildren, 2 of whom graduated, and 1 that's going to graduate next year from West Lafayette High School. And I just wanted you to know that the share of Indiana's gross domestic product, as Dr. Killian said, went from 2.6 to 2.2. And that means that by last year, we spent roughly $1.3 billion less on education than we would have had we just grown with education spending at the same rate as the overall economy. And finally, the commission figured that the actual cuts to K-12 spending work out to about $580 million million per year. And that's why you saw the next level compensation commission ask for $600 million. And that was to cover teacher salaries and other areas that our school corporations need. When you don't receive the number of students that you need to receive, as Dr. Killian pointed to, we're happy that we're growing, but you have to grow a certain amount to get those dollars. And that's almost identical, that $589 million, to the $600 million that they claim would bring teachers back to 2010 levels. In other words, almost 97% of the reduction in educational funding came out of teacher salaries. So, and this is a study that's not done by legislators, it's done by Michael Hicks from Ball State. Dr. Killian certainly discussed many of those issues. Now let me tell you the good part that happened today, funding for virtual instruction in public schools. That happened today in Ways and Means, today at 11:30 on the House floor. We very rarely meet on the House floor, we meet in the conference center, in the South Government Center. But today we met there, and that will certainly, we hope, take care of some of the dollars in addition to some of the federal dollars that are going to happen. And that happens to be a very important bill. And I want you to know that it did get bipartisan support. Now, the interesting thing is that it does require to prepare a report regarding the 2021 school year and a report regarding the 21-22 school year that provides submitted information and is studied by the department no later than December 1st to find out what has happened to our students and to find out how the students have gained or have a learning loss regarding students in kindergarten through 10th grade. And I hope we'll find that they have. Now, the good news is that sometimes it's just a good thing to kill bills. There was a bill, 1073, by Representative Westphal up north in Lake Station area that provides that a person who administers a non-accredited, non-public secondary school has the authority to execute any document required by law, rule, regulation, or policy in the state to provide certain evidence regarding the child's education. Now, fortunately, that was not heard, but you can imagine some of the things that are going on right now. Also, 1005 has vouchers that are able to be received, the family of 5, if you make $170,000. Family of 4, $145,000. Now, folks, many of our private schools are good schools. I'm not here to tell you they're not, but the dollars and cents that started to be the issue for helping low-income children to get to schools is not happening. It has turned to be a situation where very private folks who are fairly wealthy, I think, or certainly higher middle class, can receive a voucher. And that's not the way public education should be funded, and vouchers should not be used. So we're hoping that that bill changes over in the Senate. As Dr. Killian said, many of us voted no on that bill, and we will continue to fight that situation. Also, I think we should be concerned about career technical education. Now, many of our West Lafayette students, as you know, go into STEM, and we're very pleased about that. But we have many students who at our career technical institutions go into culinary arts, communication studies, and also cosmetology, as well as some other issues. And they're cutting out these folks to go with STEM. And I can tell you just one example, and then I'll be quiet. A young man by the name of Brian Lamb started to be very active in WJEF at Jefferson High School. He went on to WBAA at Purdue University, became active, and Henry Roosevelt at WASK Brad, you remember Henry? I gave him a little job as disc jockey at night on WSK. He went to Washington, D.C. to work with Chuck Robb for President Johnson as a legislative intern in the White House. But he wanted to continue his career that he started at Jeff with interviewing folks. So he asked Tip O'Neill, who was a friend of Representative Johnson and Reagan. Remember Speaker Tip O'Neill from the East Coast? Brian asked him if he could televise some of the folks that appeared on the House floor. The Senate said, no, we don't want you in there. But the House folks determined that they would allow him to come. And that's where C-SPAN 1, 2, and 3 started, here in Lafayette, Indiana. And that's the rest of the story. Many of you know that Brian is recognized throughout the country and the world for having C-SPAN. So I want you to address, if you don't mind, the career technical education areas too in the future, if you are concerned about that. But let me say, we're working hard to try to do something about that funding, and we will continue to work very diligently to get up to that $600 million. It's now at about $377 million, and that's not going to take care of folks what we want for your public education. So thank you, Dr. Killian, for all those wonderful studies. Tried to memorize all that as we went, and congratulations again to the parents and children for your awards. We're very proud of you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Representative Clinton. We're going to take a 10-minute break. Those that don't want to stay for the riveting second half, feel free to make your exit. If you want to sign up for the board meeting, the comments page is in the back. Restrooms are through these doors that I'm pointing at to your left. And we'll gather back in 10 minutes. Thank you. here in just a couple of minutes, to the best of my ability, and then we'll get to our board, to the high school presentation, and to the board meeting. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard from Jane Hernan, you've heard from Brock Browser, you've heard from our financial advisor, from our bond counsel. We use experts to drive decisions, and we use their expertise to help us make those decisions. When we bring proposals to you and we look at big projects, we get stakeholder input, and we do our best to give you expert information and data. And of course, everything's projections. And of course, sometimes those projections work, and sometimes those projections need to be altered, or we have to alter plans if projections don't pan out. For instance, someone had told me in 2016 that we would be in the middle of a pandemic. I probably would have retired by now, or we might have done some other things. However, you have to do the best you can with the data that you have, and then you have to make adjustments as you move forward. That's how leadership works. Just imagine if we, with our pandemic, we had our kids still at Happy Hollow. I just don't know how we would have managed because of the issues. And I want to help you remember the past a little bit. Remember our overcrowded cafeteria where not all the kids could be seated. Remember our crowded facilities, those orchestra concerts were just packed. Remember our classrooms. We couldn't even handle technology in our classrooms for I-STEP and the state's conversion over to everything electronic. We didn't have enough plugs in our classroom, electrical plugs. Our infrastructure, we were always having our maintenance guys do this. It was just crazy stuff. Our infrastructure was just, had a terrible situation in Happy Hollow. The solution from the facilities team was to, of course, build a new school at Birchfield site, and that's what you're studying in. And I couldn't be prouder of this school. I couldn't be prouder of the renovations we've done at the elementary school, at the junior, senior high school, because we're creating an environment where teachers can teach and students can learn and we can stay competitive. So the intermediate school was built here. And the performing arts is now part of our school day with band, choir, and orchestra rooms, which I'm very proud of as a former band director, choir director. Cumberland, again, crowded facilities, crowded classrooms, needed more learning spaces, crowded media center, infrastructure issues. A lot of people don't remember this. Our maintenance people really remember this. Crowded lunchroom. The solution was to do the renovations. I wish we could have had more funds just to tear down the school and to start over, but from the facility scorecard and from the engineers that went through it, they said that we could reasonably improve it by doing a remodel. I would at some point like to get kindergarten out of there because I think kindergarten classrooms need more space, more learning opportunities, and it would be nice to get to a point where we could repurpose Happy Hollow, which we're going to be working on in a variety of ways. So that's the reason we did West Lafayette Elementary School. And first time in the history of our schools that we have operational kitchen in all schools so students can receive a hot breakfast or a hot lunch. Imagine that, 2019, we got to the 21st century finally. And Cumberland Cafe is wonderful. I've been there many times when the children are there and having our own kitchen staff and operational kitchens and our classrooms, having the upgraded technology and upgraded HVAC systems. And can it be better? Absolutely. Do we want it better? Absolutely. But we took what we had and we tried to make it better to the best of our abilities. And we still have some work that we can do and continue to do. Junior senior high school, this is interesting. This is our northeast stair tower. And I'll show you what it looks like now with the new construction. This is our old cafeteria. This is what kids were having to do to eat lunch. We didn't have enough seating or space. Crowded classrooms, infrastructure. Someone asked, why'd you need a new pool? Well, the facilities, the construction engineer said that you were either going to have to tear it down and start over or create a new facility. So it was more cost effective to do a new facility and repurpose the old pool into more classrooms. So that was one of the reasons the facility teams made that recommendation. And our swim team, it just loves it. I've heard nothing but good things about it. Maybe someone's not happy about it, but I've not heard that. Infrastructure with or crowded performing arts. And again, we looked at improving things with the Bob Kelly Performing Arts Center, the Richard Wax Aquatic Center, with the James R. Guy Academic Wing, adding STEM, et cetera. RDP Cafe is now offering multiple food stations, and on average, our kids get through the lines and get their food and are seated in under 12 minutes. That's on average. If we have a technology issue, or a couple of weeks ago when we have fewer staff members and some of us administrators are serving food, that made it a little longer because some of us didn't know how much to give students and where everything was, but we did our best. I actually had a good time serving food in the RDP Cafe. This is that Northeast Stair Tower. Look at it now. Much safer if we ever have to have an exit of the school. I can't imagine what our kids would have had gone through if we had to exit through that old stair tower, and the northwest stair tower is now starting to be renovated to widen it and make it a safer entry and exit. We have more science labs, more classrooms. We have the Williamson Media Center that students are going to be able to use. We have STEM technology, and already our students and classes, our teachers are starting to use it. And our new aquatic center, again, new classrooms. And then in the coming months, you'll start seeing the renovations for the Bob Kelly Performing Arts Center. So how do we provide a world-class education system? Well, you can look at metrics. We also employ a lot of people that have helped us. Research that we've done in our school district, what makes a world-class school and how to get there, right? James Strong. It's an excellent read if you're interested. Jamie Ballmer, Schools Cannot Do It Alone, who works with our school district. Mark Tucker, who's in Rising Up and Mark, leading high-performance school systems, works with us, or has worked with us. Hasse Salzberg, a very close acquaintance of mine, through the work we do with Rising Up and Mark. I work with him at Harvard, teaching classes in education administration, finished lessons, what we can learn from the Finnish education system. Mark Tucker drew Tough Choices and Tough Times, and Diane Rapid, Reign of Error. These are all people that have assisted with our school district to help us to create a world-class education system using the appropriate systems that the best education system in the world will utilize. Are we there? No, because not until every student has success, I would say we never have arrived. But we still look at metrics, and these are on our website, plus other things. One of the big, tough decisions that our school district had to make, of course, was the reopening plan. And, of course, not a lot of people, I shouldn't say this, let me say this right. Not everyone understands the process that we had to go through for the reopening. And I'm very proud of what we've been able to accomplish through a very unknown situation. And those of you that were behind the scenes seeing all the emails and phone calls and some of the vitriol that was coming through because we were trying to reopen schools, that's just the nature of leadership. We're going to make decisions, and some people are going to be happy, some people aren't. The governor ordered the closure of schools in March 2020. What I'm very proud of is that we paid all employees during the closure. We used our cash balance and paid all employees. Not one employee was laid off during that closure. Not all school districts will be able to say that to you. Governor ordered all schools reopen in fall of 2020. Many parents asked us to have teachers teach online and on site through our collaborative process with WLEA. We worked on a process which we extended 79 junior senior high school contracts. We hired one additional kindergarten teacher. We hired one retired teacher. We added 10 permanent substitute teachers to work in our schools, and we are spending this year approximately $600,000 more than we're bringing in because this school board accepted the recommendation of doing these things to ensure that our teachers were employed teaching online and on-site, and in collaboration with the WLEA and our teaching staff, we've been able to accomplish that. We do this in a collaborative way. We use, again, experts. We have our corporation physicians. We have the Tippecanoe County Health Department, our registered nurses, collaboration with our Teachers Association, administration, staff members, also working with TSC and LSC. We also had representation from a group of parents we spoke with. And one of the things we do, we pay and will continue to pay all employees who are quarantined. Even though the federal law now has changed and we're not required to do that, we do that. And I'm very proud that we do that. Over 2/3 of our students are attending school on site. Over 88% of our teachers are teaching on site. And I still believe this is true. I've checked a couple of times. I don't see a COVID-19 tracker regionally from other school districts, but maybe there's some now that have popped up. We try to keep our community informed with that. And then food service is providing over 100 breakfasts and lunches per day to virtual students. And so I think those are great things. So what's our considerations for improving? Well, one, I think we need to continue to promote our school district to increase student enrollment. If our student enrollment continues to go down, we will receive even less funding from the state. And if we have less funding from the state, then we're going to have to make difficult decisions with regards to, since our referendum, we're using now about 99.9% of our referendum that we're bringing in to take care to bridge the gap in the budget and making sure we have the money to fund the increases for staff, maximizing the referendum to ensure we maintain our arts, music, PE, sports, extra co-curricular programs. In my opinion, we need to really improve our efforts to promote the West Lafayette schools to try to increase student enrollment. We need to allow the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee to work diligently and intentionally to better serve our diverse, inclusive, and equitable school community. We got to give them time and space. We need to begin building partnerships, fundraising, educating the community about what's going to take to convert Happy Hollow. I will tell you there are 3 or 4 different conversations going on with partners throughout our community to possibly help us with that. If we are to fund that on our own, it's about 12 to 15 million, but there are other options to consider, and there might be other partnerships that would help us decrease that cost, or maybe not even have those costs if some partnerships develop. We need to consider additional staffing as school district grows. I do believe we need to improve communication and look at staffing to improve communication, to provide more timely information to our community, and we need to advocate for public school funding and fight back against the legislation that continues to divert public school funds to other initiatives. And there are other improvements that we're working on, but those are the ones that I wanted to highlight. And I want to leave you with this. Back in 2012, Jamie Vollmer, who wrote the book Schools Cannot Do It Alone, now a pro-public school proponent. He was one of those charter schools, voucher school type of people. He was tasked by the governor of Iowa to go out and basically straighten out public schools. And once he got out into the public schools and he started working with teachers, started working with staff members, administration, he figured out, hey, what's being touted out there in the public is not what's going on in our public schools. And so he came, well, TSC, LSC, and West Lafayette brought him in 2012 to speak to our Greater Lafayette Chamber dinner, and this is an excerpt from his speech.
We're going to have to change this, folks. We're going to have to come together as communities and begin to change the fundamental building blocks of how we educate children. The problem is, the reason I say as a community, is that if you allow just your educators to proceed down this path, they're going to get cut off at the knees. I've watched it dozens and dozens of times. I've watched folks like Rocky Killian, progressives, interested in doing what's right for kids, start to attack the core of the system, changing the way we group kids. We group kids right now in this country on the basis of their date of manufacture. Think about it. And yet in here, especially in this county, with this fine university, in Harrison, and Ivy Tech, you've got parents, you've got children showing up in his schools at pre-kindergarten, and their parents have read to them every single night since they were born. Oh, who am I kidding, looking at this group? Some of you put speakers on the wife's belly and pumped baby Einstein and Mozart into the womb. The problem is that that child comes in a pre-kindergarten and sits right next to a little girl who's never seen a book. Nobody's ever read to her. And in my hypothetical, both of these kids have exactly the same intelligence level. We're going to have to rethink how we group kids. We're going to have to rethink the curriculum. People complain, oh, these kids don't know what we used to know. They're not being taught what we were taught. How can we teach them everything that we were taught and everything that's happened since without adding a minute to the school calendar in 8 decades? How do you do that? We're going to have to rethink it. We're going to have to rethink the way we measure progress. You don't know it, but you're on a slippery slope with me right now. I'm not going to go down. We are locked in a national hysteria of standardized testing, and it's killing us as a nation. And the businessmen and women in this room, it's killing you. The very qualities that men and women in business need from their employees are not being even addressed anymore, because the people working in your schools are under so much pressure for those kids to perform well in the I-STEP. We're killing ourselves with this, and yet it's everywhere. We're going to have to take one community at a time, rise up, and push back, because it is not an appropriate way to educate the children of the 21st century. We're going to have to rethink that. But, as I said, I've seen people in his position go after assessment, go after curriculum, go after instruction, the school calendar, and after about 15 to 18 months of aggressive internal planning, you know what happens in those school districts? Nothing. Oh, I misspoke. Something happens. Something happens that's apparent on school board election night, when 3 or 4 people in the community run for the board on an anti-everything platform, and they win. And if they don't control the board, they fracture it. And the only thing that changes in those school districts, it's not instruction, it's not curriculum, it's the superintendent.
So the question I leave with you, working together or fracturing, that's what you as the new school board members, that's what you as veteran school board members have to figure out. I can't tell you how to do that. All I can do is do my best to bring to you the experts, listen to the people doing the work in the schools, have trust our administration to bring you information that's been vetted by stakeholders, and then you have to make a decision. But if we're not working together, then we're divided. And a house divided against itself can't stand. So that doesn't mean we can't disagree, but we have to work together for the common good of our students and for the common good of our teachers, common good of our schools, common good for our community. And there are many voices that you're going to have to determine who you're going to listen to. So I have an attitude of gratitude. I want to thank everyone that has worked during this difficult time in the pandemic. And some quotes for you: a leader takes people where they want to go. A great leader takes people where they don't want to go but ought to be. That's what I hope all of you as a school board would aspire to be. Great minds discuss ideas. Average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people. And my favorite one is Steve Jobs. If you want to make everyone happy, don't be a leader, sell ice cream. You know, it sounds like a good retirement gig. I don't know what kind of ice cream I'd sell, but West Side Way, Scarlet and Gray, that's what we agreed to do in October 3rd, 2016, and we're making progress. Are we there? Absolutely not. But every day we try to improve, and I've not met one person in our school district in 14 years who comes into the school saying, you know, I think I'm just going to make people miserable. I think I'm going to not do what's best for kids. I think I'm going to make bad decisions. I don't find that in our public schools. Everyone comes in and works very hard to do the best that they can and tries to improve every day, and that's what I appreciate about our staff, our teachers, our administrators. So with that, I will open it up for questions from our school board and see if you have any questions before we get to the high school presentation.
I have a question, Robert, but I got a comment. This is, I came on board about the time all of this was beginning, and obviously heard all of this and meetings, but it was really, I know it was a long night and a long work session, but it was really helpful to me to see it all laid out again in order. Have a recap. So I know it's a lot of time for you. Thank you for doing it.
Yep.
I was here back in 2005, and I'm on the Blue Ribbon Task Force. Many other members of our community, fact members, name it, there were a lot of people on there, there were a lot of talent. And we came up with a whole host of ideas in Rocky area. And one of them was the facing our Special Education Foundation. I'll tell you this, if it weren't for our Special Education Foundation, we'd be in dire straits. They came in and they helped us out, and they helped us promote our school fund referendum. And I'll tell you this, the Blue Ribbon Task Force had that on the list, but we didn't think to see it. We didn't think we'd get passed. I want to tell you this, I've got our social behind that collectively, and the guy over there that wrote it is our superintendent. He put his shoulder behind it, literally went door to door, and talked to our constituents, and informed them about what our situation is. Not only that, we town hall meetings, and we informed everyone what our situation was. So I want to compliment him on the effort and the vision that he had. I want to compliment some of the members of the foundation vision that they have shared. It's important. Because without us working together, we can't change anything. So I really appreciate Dr. Tilly being here. Thank you.
The only thing I would add is we do see a lot of the rankings and all that kind of stuff. And I think one of the things, at least in my time, has been that those are all well and good. That's part of it. We're proud of that. And it's not taking anything away from the achievements of our parents and our students in our district. But that's not our measuring stick. Our job is to create the best environment all the way in any situation. We're proud of what we've been able to do, but I think as Rocky said 15 times in presentations, we've got what to do. And it's been an extremely challenging time this past year, not the least of which it's been for our students and our parents and our teachers. We've been grateful for the effort that they have given and the challenges that they've had. I think that will go down in history, and we've yet to even fully uncover what all was transpired in this last year. It's hard for all of us to fully comprehend that and be able to totally see what really did transpire. But I think time will know that this has been heard early enough by a lot of people, and we're very grateful and grateful for that. And that's one example of us coming together as a community to be able to pull this off. Anything else? Okay, we'll move on.
Teachers, obviously, is biased in regard, but I hear the late night conversations between teachers on how to handle situations, especially in this virtual year, and just the effort they've gone into what they put forth should not be forgotten about. It hasn't been by this group, but for the record, it needs to be stated that the teachers are real heroes.
And it's okay to be biased. anything else from Vale's, move on to academic achievement, the junior, senior high school presentation.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. We're going to kind of do this in three parts. I want to just briefly run down the proposed schedule, hit some of the highlights of it. And then Mr. Walbaum is going to kind of take you through the process of how we have gone, from the first phase through 10 different iterations of the schedule. And then I'll come back up at the end and try to share with you what we feel are the benefits to this schedule. Now, mind you, none of this is in existence if COVID is still ruling the world in August, right? So if we still have to operate with significant social distancing and things like that, school would obviously look very much the same as it does this year. But if not, and hopefully not, we're excited about this opportunity for our students and staff. And the highlights are simply this. We're going to have a 7-period school day with 48-minute classes and 5-minute passing periods with a later start time, which we have found has been very important to our students. We heard that it's the research is better for the adolescent mind, and then it provides for an earlier release in the evening, which will allow for more family time. And really, one of the things that we're most proud of is that time period from 7:50 to 8:15 in the morning, where our students are going to get to meet with each other for club time that has been missing during this last school year for COVID. It's going to allow for a more equitable opportunity for young people to come in and meet with teachers to provide and get extra academic support. And it's going to allow for more students to be able to utilize a lot of the new technology and facilities that this board has been so gracious in allowing our school to build. And so for those reasons, we think this 7-period school day is going to be very impressive and important and effective for our students. Obviously, the big question has been over the lunch period, which is in period 4. You'll see that students will receive students and staff will receive a 32-minute lunch period, and we will add to that lunch period a little homeroom time, and I'll discuss that more at the end. And quite frankly, in a year where COVID has wreaked such havoc, the homeroom is actually a positive that has come out from COVID, and something that we've learned over the course of the 2020-21 school year. So with that, that's the general outline of the schedule as proposed. I'm going to let Mr. Walbaum kind of talk to you about the process of how we got to this schedule, and then I'll come back up here at the end and try to tell you why we think this schedule benefits our students and staff.
Thank you, Mr. Ulrich. I already messed up. There we go. This process really began, of course, as we've had kind of a look back on many years throughout the school corporation. This process with regard to the schedule and studying the school day really began as an outgrowth of the Reimagining West Lafayette Schools Committee that refined, re-examined our existing strategic plan. And from that process, from the fall of 2019, it was finalized in January of 2020, we were asked as a school administration to review several different parts of that strategic plan. First of all, we were asked, and again, I won't read all of these to you, but we were asked to provide as much equity as possible. What can we do to take away some of those barriers for student success? What can we do to provide an equitable opportunity for all of our students? We were asked to look at different academic supports. What can we do for all of our students to, again, provide equity throughout our curricular, extracurricular, co-curricular offerings? We were asked from the strategic plan, again, to look at safe and efficient scheduling. What can we do to maintain our diverse elective offerings, especially in the arts and music, which again, we've gone through at several points this evening. And we were asked to examine ways that we could ensure a more formalized time for clubs to meet in our school schedule. And then finally, and again, some of I think Dr. Killian called it alphabet soup tonight, we were asked to look at what in our building we call MTSS, multi-tiered system of support, other buildings do too, for academic support. What can we do to provide some common time there for students who might be in need of academic intervention? And that's a nice combination there. I think when we look at that club time in the morning, we shouldn't overlook the importance of a common instructional time for either teachers for professional development or obviously students for our problem-solving process. And that's been something where we've had a hard time getting teachers together at a common time throughout the day. So those objectives, those action steps grew out of that strategic plan revision in the fall of 2019 and early winter of 2020. So last year, throughout our winter professional development sessions with the departments, we worked with our department chairs and individual departments to identify some teacher volunteers who might be interested in serving on a committee that would examine the school day. What can we do to, and we went into it, this was not a closed lunch committee, this was a committee to offer a safe and equitable and efficient school schedule. We went into that and had our first meeting. It was one of the last meetings we had before the big shutdown in March. We had our first meeting with 17 people, students, faculty members, food service, transportation, administration, counselors. We had our first meeting on March 6th of 2020 and had a really interesting and thoughtful discussion where we talked about the qualities of the ideal school day. If we took away all the constraints in our schedule, what can we do to build something here? So you'll see that later. Obviously, later on in March, we had to shut down. We didn't come back to in-person learning for the remainder of the year, and we spent some time this summer crafting a schedule that would provide a safe environment for lunch. And so we went from our traditional 2-period lunches in the junior senior high school to 4-period lunches. Again, to make sure that we didn't go over our capacity there in the LGI and the cafeteria and the food court. And so we learned some things from that experience this year. We learned, first of all, that the multiple lunch hours work. We learned that our students, go back to class, they can settle back in and have a meaningful experience there. We learned that our teachers do their usual excellent work in improvising and planning. We learned that we actually liked our homeroom session, our homeroom time. There's a little downtime in the school day for our students. I'll be honest, this year's homeroom is simply so the other half of quarter of the students can go to lunch. And so we keep a homeroom time in that schedule, but we maintained a little bit of that downtime in the proposed schedule here. The School Safety Committee has met, it meets yearly multiple times, but it also has continued to review and revise. We have a number of administrators and teachers who are Indiana school safety specialists, but obviously we have discussed things from entry and exit from our building. We discussed lunch. We discussed, obviously we're fortunate, one of the often overlooked facility upgrades is the new office complex and safe and secure entrance in the junior senior high school as well. The school data team conducted surveys, teacher needs assessment, and student needs assessments in September and October of this year, and we used a lot of that information where, again, it is just that. They identified some areas where they might be struggling in this odd school year, and we tried to come up with some ways that we can address that, certainly this year, but obviously moving forward. So we've had several opportunities in our departments as they have met, and with our department chairs, we've discussed the proposed schedule and actually refined a lot of things as a result of those meetings. The schedule that we took to our department chairs in December is much different, in subtle ways, in 3 or 4 areas from the schedule that we are proposing now. So again, I went through the considerations for the ideal schedule, and this is where people tend to hone in on one or two key issues and how it will affect them. How will it affect their children? How will it affect their just even their neighborhood issues or their lunch issues? So obviously, it was very important that we maintain our vast, diverse course offerings, especially in the arts and music, some areas where schools sometimes might make some cuts. We mentioned the common meeting time for clubs and activities. We certainly wanted to have a safe and efficient way to deliver breakfast and lunch. We shouldn't overlook breakfast in our building. We serve over 100 hot breakfast meals a day, and that's with approximately 1/3 of our students who are learning virtually. So the breakfast has been a real success story for our food service and with the improvement in the facility there. We wanted to maximize the social interaction opportunities at lunch. Those of us who a lot of us remember the 2 periods for lunch. We had plenty of social interaction opportunities at lunch. This year, when we went to 4, we've limited those. And some of that is because of, well, it's all because of COVID and masks and the spacing. But we thought in this proposal to go to 3 periods, it allows us to run through lunch safely. We know that we're going to have a dedicated junior high lunch, so 7th and 8th graders will have the same lunch. And then we propose that the high school then would have the other 2 lunches. So again, we're going to increase those opportunities for some social interaction. We have, in a few of our lunch periods right now, we have kind of an odd section of 7th grade, for example, where they have D lunch while the rest of the 7th grade has C lunch. And so that's a challenge for our students. I mentioned earlier the academic intervention supports that would be a part of that common time in the morning, and obviously so would the professional collaboration opportunities in the morning as well. So we went through the course of this school year. I mentioned our department chairs already and the needs assessments. We have solicited feedback from our teachers. The WLEA teachers have been outstanding with their comments and questions and review and helping us go through this process. We did also have a productive meeting, well, several meetings with the WLEA and board teacher discussion 2 weeks ago now. We did meet with the parent council at their February parent council meeting, and we're on the agenda for their March meeting coming up Wednesday morning as well. As a part of that and preparing for that, in some of these discussions, we are preparing kind of an FAQ document to share because we are getting now some common questions as we get the word out. We've had some parent emails asking some questions. Generally, Mr. Ulrich and I will pick up the phone and call those parents because, as you can tell tonight, it's more than an email. I can't just send this to you and try and win you over, at least get you to see it where we are here. But we look forward to those discussions on Wednesday. Mr. Ulrich met with both student councils separately, the junior high and senior high student councils, and again had some thoughtful feedback there. We did have some student representation I mentioned on that school day study committee a year ago. So we've gone through several different steps. I think at last count we were at about 10 drafts of this schedule from 45, 47, 48-minute classes, 6-period day, 7-period day, the old 8-period day, you name it. It is important to note, even though it looks like a 7-period day, and you think last year we had an 8-period day, it was still 7 because your 8th was lunch. And now with this, your 7th, part of your 7th is lunch. So it's important to note, obviously, again, the improvement that we've made in the facilities. No schedule is going to be perfect. We understand that. But the facility improvements we've made allow us to at least explore these opportunities and bring a schedule to you for consideration to look at. Again, I mentioned all of those qualities of the ideal schedule. I think it's a nice blend. We look at, in subtle ways, a later start time and earlier dismissal, which will help our students. We'll get to that later as well. But obviously, the safe and efficient lunch. We're still able to have the club time, which we really hope will increase. The club participation, obviously, this year's not been a good year in that regard because of COVID. So we're really thankful for this opportunity, and I think this schedule will be a nice improvement. And we've tried to be responsive all throughout this process with anyone who has questions. And again, very often it's a phone call, it's a discussion, it's a face-to-face meeting, more so than an email or a PowerPoint or anything along those lines. So Mr. Ulrich's going to come back up and discuss the benefits of the proposed schedule as well. I should also mention we'll be happy to stick around tonight and answer any questions.
Okay, so really it boils down to three things as we looked at the schedule. One, we needed to make sure that we improved equity across the board for our students. Number two, we really needed to attack a significant school safety issue, as we have all, Dan mentioned, many of us are Indiana school safety specialists. And as we get trained every year, one of the things that we would discuss in those meetings was the unique opportunity that West Lafayette students have with Open Campus. And then the third thing that we were looking to do was to just ensure that our kids would get that club time back every day. I can't tell you the number of times I heard in those student council meetings how much kids wanted to meet with their clubs. You'll notice we've gone from a 50-minute class period to a 48-minute class period. Well, that could insinuate that students might have to do a little bit more on their own. They were 100% okay with that if the time was going towards that club interaction. So it meant a lot to students, and it definitely meant a lot to our faculty as well, a chance to share their expertise and to watch kids in a situation outside of the classroom. So why is the schedule that is proposed good for our school? Well, number one, it continues the tradition at Westside of exceeding the Indiana Department of Education's required instructional minutes. So we continue to spend more time in class, in school, every day than the state requires. And obviously, that translates into higher academic performance. Secondly, it utilizes a later start time to the school day. One of the things that came out of the Strategic Planning Committee was looking at a way to get students to school later. So if you remember back to that slide with the schedule on it, the buses are going to be arriving at school about 5 minutes later than they arrive now. But what that means is students who ride the bus or students who are dropped off, all students now have the opportunity to meet with teachers before school. Currently, and last year, and the year before that, and the year before that, if a kid rode the bus to school, when they got to school, they might have time to grab a quick breakfast, and then it was time to first period. They didn't have the opportunity to go meet with the teacher because they were a bus rider, or their parents maybe dropped them off right on the way to work. They didn't have the opportunity to get there earlier. So we think this is another opportunity to improve equity for our students. All students, 7-12, whether they're a bus rider or a driver, will have the opportunity to get academic support on a daily basis if needed under the proposed schedule. It also ensures that all kids will have enough time to eat breakfast if they want to. They don't have to worry about running off the bus to grab a sandwich before it gets cleaned up. So again, breakfast, full bellies, helps the mind get going in the morning. So we are appreciative that we have the opportunity to serve breakfast, and I can tell you that many, many students are using it. It creates time during the contractual day of our staff to help them work with students. So now we're not going to have to require staff, even though they will do it because they're amazing. They've done it because they're amazing. We won't require staff to have to stay after school 45 minutes, an hour to help students with work. They can do it there in the morning before the school day starts. It also allows our students to meet with multiple teachers or with multiple National Honor Society tutors that are available in the morning. They have the opportunity to kind of move around the building and see all the people they need to see, as opposed to just waiting for a study hall when a teacher would write them a pass. And then that club time in the morning is very unique, right? So prior to COVID, we had the 2 lunch periods. Students would eat for approximately 30 minutes. The last 20 minutes of the lunch period was designed for clubs. Well, we have clubs in our building that work with students in grades 7 to 12. Under the old lunch system, they weren't allowed to meet together because junior high kids had one lunch, high school kids had a different lunch. Now, with the club time being in the morning, any student in that club, no matter the grade, they can all meet together. And so we think that's going to help enhance club time, on top of the fact that the club time is actually longer now, at 25 minutes versus the 20 minutes that it used to be. We think that students will have more time to utilize the brand new media center that was just opened on Monday, as a matter of fact, because they don't have to rush in during a passing period. They have all that time in the morning that they could get it done. And really, it's a great place for kids to sit. You know, there's the commons area in the building, but it's kind of cold with the concrete, you know, benches. This new media center is amazingly warm and welcoming and has all kinds of new and modern furniture. Mr. Schreiner has spent many hours in magazines trying to find the most hip furniture for our kids, and they're going to be in there a lot to take advantage of that. It moves lunch a little bit earlier in the day. So under the two lunch system that we used to have, the second group of students didn't get served lunch until much later in the day. And again, as kids get hungrier, it makes it more difficult, more challenging to pay attention in class. The safety aspect really would be the only thing that would be needed to propose the change in lunch. We have to have 3 or more lunch periods. We cannot safely fit our entire student body in the new designed area in just 2 lunch periods. We just can't do it. It's not big enough. And it's not appropriate, it's not nice, it's not sanitary to have kids eating by their locker on the floor, which is what we used to do. Now that we've spent the money, we have this great brand new facility. We have a great place that all students can have a chance to sit and eat and enjoy their friends. But we got to have 3 lunch periods at least to do that. And now with the 3 periods, we get to have our still junior high lunch. Our 7th and 8th graders get to spend their time together, and then our high school kids have the opportunity to eat in just 2 lunch periods and enjoy their friends. The other critical piece to that safety issue is that there's not a school safety expert in America that says it's great to lock your building from 8 to 3 and then unlock it during the lunch period to let kids leave and come back. That doesn't make much sense. And it's worked at Westside. I can't stand up here and tell you that it hasn't. But it doesn't mean that there weren't students that would go off campus and come back under the influence of something. It doesn't mean that car accidents didn't happen. It doesn't mean that students weren't coming back late. By and large, it worked for a lot of kids. But it's not safe. Why would we keep the building locked all day long just to turn around and unlock and unleash the students out into the community for an hour? It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Equity reasons why, the equitable part of closing the campus is this. About 13% of the student body at the junior senior high school is on free and reduced lunch. There's another percentage, I can't tell you what it is, of students whose parents don't have extra money to give them to spend to go out to Jimmy John's. So we have a number of students in our building that would sit and eat lunch with the school-provided food, and they would see their friends leave campus and come back with Jimmy John's or Pizza Hut or whatever restaurant they stopped at. Well, that's not good for the social and emotional well-being of those students. They stand out. And it makes them feel, poorly about themselves, quite frankly. And so by doing this, by eliminating the ability for students to go off-site to grab lunch and bring it back, we've taken away one of those things that make kids stand out in a negative way. And so we're really excited about that potential opportunity. Okay? And then I want to go back to see if I can remember how to do this, go back to the slideshow to talk about that lunch period. So you can see there in period 4, and let's just look at lunch A. The lunch is from 10:54 in the morning to 11:26, so you have 32 minutes. After the 32 minutes, kids have an additional 5 minutes to get back to class. So we're really talking somewhere in the neighborhood of 32 to 35 minutes where kids are going to be able to hang out in the food court. Okay? During the next 48 minutes of class, they have class. But as we realized after talking to students and staff over the course of this year, they needed more of a brain break. They needed some more downtime outside of just lunch. And so we've been able to provide a minimal homeroom time period where kids can kind of just take that break. They get to unplug. So for 11 minutes of that class period, the teachers aren't instructing. Students will be allowed to communicate with their friends in the classroom. They can get a head start on homework. They can just listen to some music. They can put their head down on their desk to rest. This year we've had staff members that have taken their entire class outside on nice days to walk around the campus to get some fresh air. That certainly would be allowed. But it's just a chance for kids to kind of de-stress, unplug, just rest their head before they finish up the latter part of their day. And so we're excited about being able to continue to do that along with some of the old traditions we used to have at lunch, which is opening up the gym to let kids who quickly have a chance to go run around. We still allow kids to eat outside on nice days in a nice green space on the west side of the building. Certainly kids can walk around outside during lunch. They would have a chance to go visit the media center at lunch. They have all these things that they've always had, that will continue to have, they just can't do it off campus. And so we think it's a safer environment, a more equitable environment for our students. Then the earlier dismissal. I'm a former coach, and I had two kids that went through athletics and participated in musical groups. And every day after school, kids, many of our kids, have events, they have practices. And so being able to dismiss kids earlier means practice starts quicker. If practice starts quicker, I get home quicker. If I get home quicker, I get my homework started sooner. I get to spend more time with my family. All of those things are positives. Students that don't have after-school events but might have a job don't have to speed out of the parking lot to get to a 4 p.m. start time for a job. And we have more and more students who are working. And we think and have seen that percentage of kids is going to continue to grow. So for all of those reasons, we think this proposed schedule, the safety, the equity, the importance we're placing on club time, we think this proposed schedule is one that will benefit our students, will benefit our staff, and we are certainly excited to present it to you for review. Please continue to know that not every schedule is going to be 100% perfect. Certainly, we can't make every family situation met to the satisfaction of everybody, right? Because everybody's a different across the board. They have different priorities. But anytime, any parent or any kid or any community member wants to know more about the schedule, there's our contact information. Please encourage them to speak to us. The proposed schedule will be on the website. The FAQ questionnaire and sheet will be on the website by this time next week, so that the common questions we've gotten might help pass out some more information for those who are interested. Any questions for either Dan or myself?
Any questions? We've all been part of an initial Zoom meeting as well here in the last week or so, but any additional questions at this time from anybody? At this point? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. We'll continue to look at that. Thank you. Appreciate all your time and effort and all the time you spent. And again, I would, for those that are interested, again, you certainly can talk and speak with email addresses, and also I do agree that with Eric, we need to talk and be able to do this, not be email, but in discussion is very, very helpful. I think that's a key point in this entire process. Okay. Thank you guys very much. Okay, we will we may take a break, but if not, we'll go ahead and get going. So we'll start with call to order the Board of Regulars. March 1st, 7:15 Camping School. 8:40 p.m. Board of School Trustees March 1st meeting. I'll need approval of the agenda. Moved by Mrs. Witt. Second by Mr. Shaw. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Opposed? Hearing none, that motion does carry. Approval of the minutes of February 1st, 2021 regular meeting. Motion approved. Moved by Mrs. Austin. Second by Dr. Springer. Discussion, any changes to that? Any changing? I've already sent that motion. All in favor of the motion then? Please say aye. Opposed? Hearing none, that motion does carry. Communication to the audience. The one person who wanted to speak on the proposed schedule is actually not an agenda item, so we'll put that as a non-agenda item. We'll certainly have an opportunity to speak at the close of this meeting. Unfinished business, I have none. We've already done the academic achievement, student recognition, school board policy revisions, and Dr. Killian for item 3 and 4 is yours.
Yes, the OLA has recommended our highlight. So we're the committee has met and has legal review. Plus, I want to thank Tom, Jane, and Joel, our athletic department for also reviewing. So we're making recommendations for your approval over timeline.
Okay. Need a motion, please? Moved by Mrs. Austin. Second by Dr. Springer. Discussion, please. Questions? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. And opposed? Hearing none, that motion does carry. Extracurricular authorization, and Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you. We have two proposed motions. One concerns significant credit card accounts for the ECA. We're actually going to phase these cards out, but because only signatory on it is the retired ECA treasurer, we ask consideration for a motion to approve the other business office staff as signatories on that account so that we can execute day-to-day business of those.
Okay, motion authorization, moved by Mrs. Witt, second by Mr. Shaw. Discussion, questions, Steve? Anything else? Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. And opposed? Hearing none, that motion does carry. West Lafayette Community Schools Corporation Debt Service Resolutions, it's Ross, the floor is yours.
Okay, we have two resolutions to consider. The first one is that resolution without reading through all that. Item basically says administration is authorized to utilize the applied 2017 bond surplus balance for debt service payments. That was referred to in the information given by Baker Tilly. These bond surplus bonds are held by the trustee bank, Huntington Bank, and this gives authorization by the board, if necessary, to use those surplus funds towards debt repayment. So that would be resolution number 1. And then the second resolution, recall again, the Baker Tilly presentation talked about an opportunity if it happened that we could refinance the bonds. And to initiate that process, this resolution gives authorization if rates would go to such a point and holidays, et cetera, in a timely manner to initiate this process. So, if rates make a change or other wait 3 weeks to a school board meeting to start the process, it gives you an authorization to do that under certain conditions. One condition is to initiate efforts can be initiated as long as refinancing provides a minimum of 2% savings. And goes on to say further that it describes the bonds anticipate impact the 17, 18, 19, and 20 bond. And Director Building Court worked with Baker Tilly and ICR's bond counsel, Riley and Peters, counsel of the school corporation. So this would give access or permission to begin the process if, like I said, the conditions were right. The other consideration in this is item number 4. We're authorized to allocate circuit breaker loss from any funds by law in order to maintain the school district net tax rate of 53.75 cents, 0.5375. You know, right now, circuit breaker action is scheduled by legislation at the end of 2023. If it's not renewed, I mean, then you don't have a choice, but this does, item number 4 of this resolution gives option by the board. Typically, what we do would be coming to you if we want to do the circuit breaker resolution for the budget for 22. Because we start that process in a few months and come and ask for a waiver for the board to get that, to move the circuit breaker off of the, to divide it between the funds. And we've come to that commission that this is kind of talks about the same thing. So you got 2 resolutions for your consideration.
Okay, need a motion, please. So moved by Mr. Marley.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Wade. Discussion or questions for Ross?
I can't understand anything. Sorry.
Okay, so there's a 2% threshold here. Does that net any issuance costs, bond counsel, financial advisor?
That's how I understand it, yes.
Any other questions, anything else? Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, that motion goes carried.
Brad, your question, if down the road something changes on that, we would bring that back to the board. If we were told something different, something changes in legislation, state board of accounts, we bring that back.
Thank you. Child care agreement. Steve, back to you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kirby, the background of the ECA resolution, if I could bring it back to that.
Yes.
There was another resolution that I needed to propose for that. One is, this was 2 parts of this. One is the ECA credit cards from Huntington. We asked your consideration to change the signatories as per the memo. Also, we are going to take on ECA credit cards from Huntington, replacing a few cards I mentioned earlier. 3 of those credit cards, $5,000 limits each for the junior, senior high school, and we're not changing the elementary limits, which were changed earlier in this meeting. So I ask your consideration for a resolution to make those changes for the members.
Okay, I need a motion, please. Moved by Mrs. Austin. Second by Mr. Marley. Discussion. I know we did the ones in December, right?
That's right, those are for the elementary school, we're not doing the same thing.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. We'll go back to child care now.
Yes, I ask you for consideration for a motion to renew our contract with the Safe Harbor for and After School Carrier Company, which provides such care before and after school at Willis and Wellis. The same rate, $875 per month.
Not going to be sure. He said
Same
same
rate,
rate.
May 31st, June 1st of this year to May 31st, 2022. So it's renewal of a 1-year contract.
Need a motion, please. Moved by Mr. Marley. Second by Dr. Springer. And I heard it is the same, looking through the document, same rate.
That's correct.
Question, Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just interested actually, I know that part of this facilities upgrade rate in both buildings was to better accommodate our kiddos for after school care. Is that proven out to be successful?
Yes, it's very successful, and I can't use community room much because of the office. Huh?
Sorry.
Yeah, I keep asking to use community room, but it's always busy with after child. I don't know why we have a community room when the superintendent can't use it, but no, it has worked out very well. And what a lot of people don't understand is Indiana code requires that we have a live learning program. So that that's why we do this. And I think our building principals will tell you that our current situation is working much better, correct?
Yes, correct. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Karen.
Dr. Ganey has 3 questions. The first, do we usually ask parents to provide feedback about the child care program?
I would have to ask Margaret that. Do you get feedback from the parents on the program?
Not really. We don't have a lot of families that are utilizing the program. It's an offering, but there are lots of offerings as far as child care options for families. So we have provided an offering for them, and I have never heard any parents say that they've had anything that they didn't like about the program. They've been very cooperative with us as a school, and even through the COVID times now, just communicated back and forth about any kinds of quarantine needs, and they've been very responsive when we've had an emergency where we need to move them for a different reason. They're very cooperative with us. We just feel like they've been super flexible. Parents have never said anything negative, but I have not asked the families that are involved for specific feedback.
Dr. Springer, this is a subcontract. The organization that runs it will reach out to get parent input from time to time. Being that we're just offering the facility, it's the organization that basically runs through those processes.
Okay, your second question. Does the child care program provide some discount to low-income families?
That's up to the organization again. They're the ones that do the financials. They're the ones that bill the parents. We, by law, just offer the facility, contract with them, but they're the ones that set the rate. They're the ones that make that decision.
And then her third question is probably going to be the same answer. Do they usually provide detailed activity plans for parents?
That's up to the organization. And I have seen them operate, and they're always having activities or something of that nature. But they're the ones that administer the program, not us.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All in favor of the child care agreement, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, that motion does carry. Personnel report to Dr. Kelly, Inspector.
Yes, I recommend your approval of the names listed in the personnel report.
Need a motion, please. Moved by Mrs. Austin. Second by Mr. Martin. Discussion or questions? Seen this in advance, honestly. Got a couple changes to it here a little late. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, that personal report does pass. Accounts payable. Mr. Olhoff, back to you.
Thank you very much. We ask your consideration for approval motion to approve this month's claims. Net payroll, $954,919. Payroll deductions in the amount that were paid in February, $452,360. Other claims, $871,386. We evaluate Walnut Valley Allocation Consortium claims, which we handle for them, $29,469. And construction projects of $1,267,952 for a total of $3,576,087. A few items that you may be interested in hearing about. We had quite a few orders from the libraries, as is typical at the beginning of the new year. We made one of our 10 city bus payments for transportation. That's voucher 22710. We also made a quarterly payment to the Greater Lafayette Career Academy that pays the tuition for our students who are currently attending the Career Academy. We also had 2 payments just because of the timing of billing for Franciscan Health in the amount of $13,320, and that was for our athletic trainers. We also paid the Tippecanoe School Corporation $99,207. That's our annual bus storage and garage access that we subcontract with them. So that's a brief overview of the claims. We ask your approval.
Please. Mr. Marley.
Second.
Second by Dr. Springer. Questions or comments? Appreciate the detail.
Steve, what accounts the difference in the payrolls from the 5th to the 19th?
I have these back up on that. That shows you I have it exactly calculated.
Any other questions? If all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Give the question to Tom. Information to the board, I have none additional. Board and superintendent reports. I'm going to go to individually, just go around the horn here. If there's anything we had to fray at this point, and we're kind of early in the process here. Brad, anything you're at?
I have a few. Policy committee, we met again, we continue to meet, and I think that we don't have any new ones we need to review till May. I'm kind of excited about that. Board teacher discussion, I went as backup. Dr. Ian was not available for the meeting time. I'm sure that Dr. Killian will cover that. And then finally, I want to give an update on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. We met again about a week ago. That snowstorm pushed us to Zoom again. I'm looking forward to meeting in person this week. I think the 2 Zoom meetings have proven the need to meet in person and have good conversation. It is important to note that the charge of the committee is not to investigate or resolve specific complaints. There's been some confusion about that in the community, but groups such as WLCSC and other individuals in the community, they brought forward comments, and those are relevant as they're related, but they're not in themselves the priority. So the charge of the committee is bigger scope than individual complaints and concerns. So the charge of the committee, as you all know, we've been through this, is really to bring recommendations forward to the board to capture opportunities for a cultural shift in a systemic way. And so I hope the clarification is helpful if you receive inquiries or questions about what the work of the DI committee is. The best place to refer those inquiries is to Mrs. Saros as the chair, one of the chairs, or to Laura Falk as one of the chairs, the co-chairs. If someone has a specific concern regarding an incident, then it would be appropriate for them to go to the administrator at their respective school or the superintendent's office beyond that. But the committee itself will not be receiving those individual complaints.
Okay, Tom, anything you're in?
From the Education Foundation, a little bit about the search for an executive director. You saw the appointment of Wendy Ayler. They had 27 applicants, so they're very pleased with the pool of candidates. Again, Lindsay Walls led the search. Wendy comes from the Purdue Development Office, has an extensive background in plan giving. Got her start date is a week from today. Described as having a passion for public education, a big heart. It certainly seems like a home run hire for the foundation for all of us. And that's really the highlight of the Education Foundation.
Okay. Dr. Springer?
Board Policy Committee, as Rachel indicated, we're finished with tonight's revised policy on Title IX. We're finished with the fall updates, and the next updates will be in May or June, and those updates will be based on the new school laws attended the February board teacher discussion. Dr. Killian will report on that. Glass will have an executive session this Wednesday. Park board, cold weather was great for the Riverside Skating Center, but then the warm weather hit, so unfortunately they did have to close for the season. Last Friday was their last date. Those of you that are utilizing the off-leash dog park, Happy Hollow Park, unfortunately that's closed for, I don't know, a couple of weeks or 2 or 3 weeks. The maintenance crew will be adding a pet-friendly features, and they're working to control all the mud, trying to get some grass in there. So that, check the Parks and Rec website, and they'll post when that dog park is
I was with Mr. Schott for the foundation meeting and have nothing to add. And the community council is not meeting, and looking forward to the communication committee meet hopefully next month.
Do we have anything else to add at this point? Do we have anything to go to? Okay, now we'll go to the committee. Yeah, go ahead.
We discussed the reopening plan revision. We talked about the junior high school bell schedule proposal, and we also agreed that if moving forward at some point that becomes a reality, that there will be a reevaluation of that the next school year, getting input from staff, students, and parent council. We talked about the February 26th Professional Development Day. There is some information we're receiving that Purdue is changing their spring break next school year, and we're going to have to look at the calendar that transpires. Update about teacher, staff, vaccinations, and we started talking a little bit about considerations for the fall, and then our increased enrollment and promoting West Lafayette schools.
We'll go now move on to communication to the audience, non-agenda items, and Mary Del Forbes.
Actually, it's not on the bell schedule. It's about the state of school. Should that still be heard?
That's fine. Oh, yeah. Well,
and thank you. I realize I'm the bad guy keeping everyone here. You get a few more minutes.
Oh, you keep going on the bad guy, because I went about 45 minutes longer than the practice.
Is this on?
She on? Hang on.
All right.
I'll give you the wire.
I can pretend. It's no big deal.
Oh, come on. Let's hear you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So, thank you. I just wanted to say a few words of thanks. The impressive data that you went over in the state of the schools speaks for itself. And it's very fitting that you ended with leadership, because great leadership takes vision. Great leaders foresee the future and make steady progress toward measurable goals. Great leaders overcome obstacles with determination and grit. And we teachers see that in both our superintendent, our school board, our principals, our administrators, our colleagues, and our parents and students. Great leadership does not cower behind keyboards spewing verbal venom. Great leadership does not peddle conspiracy theories while assuming that others are conspiring against them. WLEA appreciates the leadership of Rocky and the board. We may quibble with methodology of enacting plans from time to time, but we have never once doubted that each and every board member, administrator, principal, teacher, and Rocky himself operates under one guiding question: what is best for our students? So I've come to the conclusion that in addition to COVID, some patrons are grappling with another pandemic. That's an addiction to drama. I ask our listeners tonight, could that apply to you? Are you itching to mix it up? If so, I suggest that you divert your wrath to 2 common enemies. I call them public education enemies number 1 and 2. The first is COVID. We need to get our kids back into classrooms. We've been doing all right virtually, but they learn best on site. And for that, we need vaccines. And yes, teachers need to be vaccinated. We've been joking that we now need to pack a Marlboro or something because smokers are being prioritized in our state above teachers. We can't make this up. And then those at our state house, not our local legislators, who are always very supportive, but those who seek to profit at the backs of our students. Indiana already ranks number 1 in the nation for vouchers. We can't do any better, and yet they're seeking to divert millions more. They're not even pretending that their agenda is to kill public education and privatize. So, as for WLEA, as Andy and I near the end of our term, we share a deep gratitude for your work, and we look forward to the cooperative, respectful relationship that we've always enjoyed in the months ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Well said. Amber? Amber, will you state your name and your address so you would for the record, please?
My address?
Yeah, just your home address.
212 East Navajo Street.
I've never spoken to school board before, so I have a lot of anxiety about speaking in front of people, but I'm going to do my best.
Amber, your last name?
Van Meter, Amber Van Meter, V-A-N-M-A-T-R-E. Doesn't it all sound like it's spelled? So I just wanted to let the school board know my thoughts and feelings surrounding the proposed changes to the junior-senior high school daily schedule that were presented just a little bit ago. As far as I understand, the proposal would push back the current start time by 15 minutes in the morning, which I think would be great for children. I do have some concerns that a lot of children will still probably get there only 5 minutes later than they currently do. So I'm not quite seeing the large benefit in terms of extra sleep that probably 7th or 9th grade at least would not be getting. And then I'm really worried a lot about the lunch being reduced down to 32 minutes. I have 3 children who are currently at the high school level, one who is a senior. She's a vegetarian and she also doesn't eat dairy. And so she came home almost every single day for lunch, pre-COVID days. And she would always bring a group of friends with her. And it was a great time for her to come home, obviously have her lunch because she really is specific about what she can eat and there weren't a lot of options at school. But also, it gave her time to relax, to unwind. The girls would always talk about their day, the good things that happened, the bad things that happened, the pressure they were under. I was typically there when they would come home, so I was able to hear their conversations, and a lot of times they would just sit there and laugh and relax and enjoy that 15-minute, well, it was a little more like 40 by the time they got there and went back, but they really enjoyed that time together, being away from the school building. I know teachers and administrators do their best to provide a safe and nurturing environment, but sometimes when you're in a pressure situation and the expectations are high, you just need a break and you need to be able to get away, and that's what they really felt like they were getting. My sons, who are sophomores in the school, they love their open lunch, and they love the 50-minute time period that they were able to have. To be honest with you, I think it was one of the most happiest times of their day, is what they'd say when they got home. And the reason for that is they have a lot of energy, they always have. And the open lunch gave them the ability to get outside, get fresh air, exercise, hang out with their buddies. They usually would go through the lunch line, get their lunch, go to a buddy's house who lived close by. They'd play basketball. If it was cold out, they'd play ping pong inside. And they just got that chance to sort of, like I said, get out energy. And it was really one of the most memorable things that they talk about from starting something. And I think especially when you move from 6th grade, where you're still having a lunch that involves a recess, and you're also having possibly another recess throughout the day, having that open lunchtime that's a little bit longer really gave them the opportunity to decompress and unwind. And so our family has found it to be really beneficial, and I know that we're one of the only couple of high schools that still do this, and I think that that's a reflection of what an amazing group of kids we have, that we've been able to do that for so long. I mean, I have family who went to West Side, and they all talk about open lunch, and that was the 60s, and I think it's been something that's continued throughout the time frame of our junior-senior high school, and I really would hate to see that be taken away from our kids. And so to end this comment, I'd just like to say that we require a lot out of our students, especially West Side students. You know, we talked about how we're on the top, 100 best schools in the country, and we're number one at this, and we're number one at that, but in order to achieve those things, we put a lot of pressure on our kids. We expect them to have the best scores on their SATs, and we expect them to take all the AP exams, and we expect them to play sports or be in clubs or, language groups, band, orchestra, all these things, which are great, but we need to still be giving them that time to unwind, and I think that's what lunch really did for a lot of kids. And I just would like it if we could maybe get more opinions and more input from the community and from students and from families, because the people I've spoke to, it really doesn't seem like there's been a big involvement from families and students on how they feel about this. So I hope the board really allows more time to be put into considering this plan in regards to taking in the community and the students and parents' feelings on it. So thank you very much.
Just if we are going to get back, we have a work session tonight, so there is no vote on this topic this month. Okay, any other, next regular board meeting will be Monday, April 5th at 6:30 p.m. at the Happy Hell LGI room, and I need a motion for adjournment. Thank you, Mr. Marley, seconded by Mrs. Witt. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Opposed? Hearing none, that meeting is adjourned. If there are any other questions we do have demonstrators here, they would be happy to say to answer any of those as well. So thank you all for